Okay, the Zoom meeting is now live. The YouTube will be up momentarily. Oh. So we're good.
Thank you, Emily. Well, welcome everybody to the January 11th Planning Commission meeting. John, can you cover the governor's executive order on virtual meetings?
Sure. In concurrence with the governor's executive order on conducting virtual meetings, this meeting is being recorded and also streaming live on RPA's YouTube channel, if you prefer to view it that way. Please see the chat box for the YouTube link. As part of this executive order, any votes must be by roll call, including establishing the quorum for this meeting. With that, I'll turn it over to you, Chair.
Thank you. You want to go ahead and do that roll call?
Yes, sir. So signify by saying aye if you're in presence. Blythe Bailey.
Present.
Councilman Ledford.
Here.
Thomas Palmer.
Here.
Mary Kay Hyatt.
Here.
Adam Verone. Adam Verone, just need to unmute. He's giving thumbs up. He's here. Jason Farmer.
Here.
Commissioner Greg Martin.
Here.
YL Coker.
Here.
David Matthews.
Here.
Chris Mabey.
Here.
Jimmy Parks. And then Barry Payne.
Here.
Okay, we have a quorum, Chair.
Thank you,
Hey,
John.
John, you left me off.
Oh, I did. Who? Oh, Todd. I'm sorry, Todd. Todd Lehman. My bad.
I'm here.
All right, as a reminder, all attendees must register prior to today's meeting to speak. This information was provided to applicants and public stakeholders as part of the RPA's notification procedures. It's also posted on RPA's website. If you have not pre-registered, you can still email your comments on zoning cases to rezoning@chattanooga.gov. Emily, I'm assuming you put that in the chat box. Okay, thank you.
I'm doing that now, Mr. Chair.
Okay. And so what that means is if you haven't pre-registered to speak today and you want to comment on the case, then please email at the email address that's in the chat box, and RPA staff will forward those email comments out to the legislative body for their review before final action is taken. Emily, do you want to address the chat box and how that's working in today's meeting?
Sure. So unlike previous meetings, the chat box will be available for staff and planning commission to put information out for the public, but the public will not have the opportunity to chat back. So if anybody that's attending the meeting, applicants or speakers who have registered have any technical issues, I just put the information in the chat box. They can email rezoning@chattanooga.gov or call our main RPA office at 423-643-5902, and we have staff available that can assist them with those technical difficulties. And if they're just streaming on YouTube, they can stream today, and then it will also be available on our website in the future.
Okay. Thank you, Emily. Well, I want to cover some procedural stuff in regards to today's meeting. Planning Commission has received the staff reports for the cases on today's agenda, and Planning Commission's had time to review those cases and the information provided prior to the meeting today. We'll use the following procedures for all the cases. For each case with a recommendation to approve or approve with conditions, I'll ask the staff if anyone has notified staff that they'd like to speak in opposition to the case or to the conditions. If there is no one wishing to speak, then PC can take action on it without hearing the staff presentation. And we'll have a roll call vote in each case. For staff recommendations to deny or for cases with registered speakers, I'll ask again if there's anybody registered to speak. If there is, we'll hear the staff presentation, and a staff person will move the registered speakers into the forum with the Planning Commission unmuting them and allowing them to speak. In some cases, we'll have several people that want to speak. The total time limit is 9 minutes for opposition. And so in the past, when we were meeting in a room and there was a lot of people that wanted to speak in opposition, they would stand up and line up on the left side of the room, and we would just take them in order. In today's meeting, Emily, you've got, in the case of opposition, we're going to hear that opposition in the same order that they came into the meeting, right?
That's mostly correct. However, a few representatives of the public are representing various groups and different neighborhood residents. So they were moved to the top since they're representing multiple people that have relinquished their time to speak. And so,
Okay.
But generally it was as the order was received, yes.
Okay. So then Emily will move you into the forum so that you can talk. Just please make sure to address your statements to only the Planning Commission and not the other people that are in attendance. If for some reason your name is called and staff does not unmute you, please immediately indicate that you haven't, that you're trying to talk to us. Sometimes we've had technical difficulties or somebody on the other end of the phone's having technical difficulties. So that number to call is in the chat box. Call that number or email somebody at RPA's office so that we can try to hear from you. So staff will have their presentation. We'll hear from the applicant first. The applicant will have 7 minutes to present their request. Please note there will be a time clock displayed on the screen, so it'll keep track of any remaining time. Opposition will have a total of 9 minutes. If there's multiple speakers for opposition, which there sometimes is, then I would ask a few things. If you're here to speak and you know other people want to speak too, please keep your comments brief. Be to the point very quickly. And, as we hear from opposition, it's really helpful for us as a planning commission if the same things aren't being repeated over and over again. So as an example, in the past, we might have a particular case and there's 6 or 7 or 8 people that want to speak, and the first person gets up and says, we have concerns about the traffic, we have concerns about the density, and we have concerns about the runoff. And they kind of walk us through each one of those points, taking a minute per point. And then the second person gets up and says the exact same thing that the first person said. And the third person gets up and says the exact same thing the first and second person said. And then we're out of time. And there's 4 or 5 people that we've not had the opportunity to hear from that may have something that hasn't already been said. So we do want to make sure that we hear from opposition. We want to make sure that we're taking those sorts of things into consideration as we're making decisions as a planning commission. And we hear the points that are being made. And if they've already been made and you had planned on speaking and everything that you were going to say has already been said, then it may not be necessary for you to speak. But if you are going to speak, please make a point that hasn't already been made. I do sometimes extend additional time to opposition if there's multiple people that want to speak, but generally, I would say out of the 300 cases we hear a year, I limit all opposition to 9 minutes. The applicant will have 2 minutes to respond after the opposition gets done. And you're welcome after the meeting to direct any additional comments to the Planning Commission and or staff by sending an email after today's meeting. So also worth noting, most of the requests that we hear today, other than subdivisions, Planning Commission only makes a recommendation, and the final action on the request is taken by the local city council or county commission the following month, allowing another opportunity for input. Staff will post next meeting dates on cases in the chat box. We'll now proceed with today's agenda. Thank you everybody for bearing with me. All right. Thank you, Mr. Schultz. First case on today's agenda is preliminary plats, and this is case SD 2020-0035. And this is for a plan unit development lots 1 through 104, located at 2207 Etowah Ringgold Road. In this case, has a staff recommendation to approve. Emily, is there any opposition present?
There is not.
Move to approve.
I have a motion to approve from Barry Payne, and who gave me the second?
Councilman Ledford.
And we have a second from Councilman Ledford. Is there any discussion? All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Bailey,
Aye.
Ledford,
Yes.
Palmer,
Yes.
Hyatt,
yes,
Barone,
Yes.
Farmer,
Yes.
Lehman,
Yes.
Martin. Martin, you know,
Yes.
Coker,
Yes.
Matthews,
Aye.
Maybe,
Aye.
Payne.
Yep.
Motion carries, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Bridger. Next case on the agenda is SD 2021-0001. And this is the Bend Phase 2, lots 3 through 15, 17, 18, and 20 and 21, located at 1067 Riverfront Parkway, and has a staff recommendation to approve. Emily, is there any opposition present?
No, Mr. Chair.
Move to approve, Chairman.
We have a motion to approve from Councilman Ledford. Who the second come from? Mr. Payne on the second. So we have a motion to approve, and it has been properly seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Bailey,
Aye.
Ledford,
Yes.
Palmer,
I recuse myself.
accused, noted. Hyatt,
yes,
Barone,
Yes.
Farmer,
Yes.
Lehman,
Yes.
Martin,
Yes.
Coker,
Yes.
Matthews,
Aye.
Maybe,
Aye.
and Payne.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Bridger. Next case is a variance. It's SD 2021-0002. And this is located at 7210 Snow Hill Road. And it's a variance section 402.1 AC Hamilton subdivision regulations, lot less than 5 acres on a private easement. And this case has a staff recommendation to approve. Is there any opposition present, Emily?
No, there is not.
Move to approve. Second.
We have a motion to approve. I'm sorry, just for the record, who made the motion?
Ledford.
And the second was from Mr. Payne.
Yep.
Thank you both. So we do have a motion to approve, and it has been properly seconded. Is there any discussion? All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Bailey,
Aye.
Ledford,
Yes.
Palmer,
Yes.
Hyatt,
yes,
Barone,
Yes.
Farmer,
Yes.
Lehman,
Yes.
Martin,
Yes.
Coker,
Yes.
Matthews,
Aye.
Maybe,
Aye.
Payne.
Yep.
Motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Bridger. Next case on the agenda, and the first case under old business is 2020-0151. And this is located at 9120 Lovell Road, and is a special permit for residential plan unit development, and has a staff recommendation to approve. Emily, is there any opposition present?
There is not, Mr. Chair.
I'd entertain a motion.
Move to approve.
second,
We had a motion from Mr. Matthews and a second from Ms. Hyatt. Is there any discussion? All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Bailey,
Aye.
Ledford,
Yes.
Palmer,
Yes.
Hyatt,
yes,
Barone,
Yes.
Farmer,
Yes.
Lehman,
Yes.
Martin,
Yes.
Coker,
Yes.
Matthews,
Aye.
Maybe,
Aye.
Payne.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Bridger. All right, first case under new business is a mandatory referral 2021-0001. And this is located at 0 Northern Avenue in the town of Walden. And it's a right-of-way abandonment and has a staff recommendation to deny. Brian, we want to hear the staff presentation on this. And is there any opposition present? Emily?
Mr. Chairman, I think we do have opposition. I'm not sure Emily can answer if they're present in the room, but we did receive some opposition.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, we received written comments from 3 individuals, Carolyn Longpre, Karen Paul Stone, and Michael and Emily Pittman. The first 2 are submitted written comments in opposition. The last one, that Pittman's, submitted written comments in support, but none of them have requested to speak.
Okay.
And you all received their written comments yesterday.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Schultz?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'll go through this. This is MR 2021-001. It's a request for mandatory referral for the abandonment of public right-of-way in the town of Walden. Proposed use is from Northern Road to close this Northern Road, which is highlighted in the red, from Sawyer Road to the west to Wilson Avenue to the east, to keep unknown cars from using the personal driveway. But this is a public right-of-way. Here's a view of Northern Avenue, going from Wilson Avenue just to the right to Sawyer Road just to the left. This is an open right-of-way, so the applicant lives in this house here, has requested that this be abandoned. Here's a picture of adjacent property owners and who owns the adjacent properties. Lawson's highlighted in red, that is the applicant. They're the ones requesting to close this right-of-way. Again, so they own these 3 parcels here, or 3 lots, as well as a lot here that fronts Wilson Avenue. We have the Harveys located at the corner of Sawyer Cemetery and Northern Road. The Pittmans, this is one of the letters we received in support of the closure. And here's the Dentons and the Langs. Again, most of those properties front Wilson Avenue. You do have these properties over here, which is owned by the Dempseys, McGill's, and Gann. They have access off of Lucille Trail, which is off Sawyer Road, just right here. It's a private road. Here's a view of the request looking from Sawyer Road. Looks like a personal driveway, but it's again a public right-of-way. This is a view at the other end of Wilson Road. This is again, it's like a personal driveway, but it is public right-of-way. This is, I think, installed by the Lawsons, who are the applicant. Continuing on that road, this is the Lawson's home, the applicant, and the road just, I guess, soon cuts back to the left and goes back out to Sawyer Cemetery. So it looks like a personal driveway, but again, it is a public right-of-way to be used by the public. Here's the site plan that was submitted with the request. You can just see they're wanting to close this off to keep cars from traveling as a cut through from Wilson Avenue to Sawyer Road. Staff looked at this. The staff recommendation is to deny. The right-of-way does provide access and service to several parcels and would landlock 2 of those parcels if closed. The right-of-way does provide connectivity to Wilson Avenue and Sawyer Road. Again, Sawyer Road's just to the left of this screen and Wilson Avenue is just to the right. It does provide connectivity between those 2 streets. So based on that and the review of the adjacent parcels, staff recommended to deny this right-of-way abandonment request.
I have a question.
Mr. Chairman, I think you're on mute, Mr. Chairman.
Well, it's easier to conduct the meeting if you can't hear me. I know Councilman Ledford wanted to say something, and so I want to hear whatever question that is. But Emily, I was asking if if the applicant is actually present. Do you know?
They are.
Okay. Councilman Ledford, did you have a question?
I did. Thank you, Chairman. Hey, Brian, which 2 properties are landlocked? Because I think I read you had mentioned in the report 7 were landlocked.
Let's see if I got you on mute. Actually, all of these do have frontage. They would provide access to the rear. Looking at these parcels here, it would provide access. Harvey's, if you look at the aerial map, it wouldn't technically landlock. They do use this as a driveway to their property.
Okay.
And
My
these over
next-
here, these properties here are accessed by Lucille Trail. This parcel would be landlocked if it is abandoned. Same thing with this one. It would be a landlocked. This would be landlocked. This one here does barely touch Wilson Avenue at the rear corner here, but in essence, it would sort of be landlocked if that right of way is closed, because the right of way goes equal to adjacent property goes on either side.
But the
So
people requesting the closure are the people that own these pieces that you're worried about being landlocked. Is that correct?
That is correct. They're highlighted in the red with the red name Lawson. They do own pretty much all those. A plat would have to be submitted if this is closed to make sure those lots are not landlocked if it is closed. And this ultimately goes on the town of Walden.
Hey,
Sorry, I had one more follow up. Brian, did you say that the what we saw, the pavement, which really looked like a driveway, that was paid for by the applicant?
I'll let them answer that if they are here in a meeting. It looks like
Sure.
it would have been.
Okay.
Walden has this unique thing that you can get a special permit to put a driveway in an unopened right of way. Emily did some research on that. We could not find where that permit was ever issued. I believe this right of way was the old county right of way when Walden annexed this property in. It just was incorporated as Walden right of way. So assume at some point they either got permission to put the driveway in this right of way or went through a special permit. We just could not find that.
Okay, I'll ask the applicant.
Yeah, that is the danger of doing that special permit. If you do it in an open right of way that's owned by the city or county, at your expense, you put a driveway in and it can be used by the public.
I have a question. Brian, can you go back to the taxi? There you go, right there. Joe, remind me, and I think I remember correctly, remind me what happens if we abandon this right away.
If it is abandoned by the town of Walden, typically it goes, if it's a 20-foot right of way, 10 foot goes to these property owners on the left and 10 foot would go to the property owners on the right. It originally goes back to the original parent property where it was dedicated way back when. So I always tell people it goes equal distance to either property on either side. So the Lawsons don't get the whole thing.
Yeah, so if we recommended to abandon this right away, and then the town of Walden did it as well, the way the right of way rules are, they would have to go in and now have a private agreement with the Harveys, the Pittmans, and the Dentons to use that access if they're using that access.
That is correct. That's correct. If the Pittmans have access off of this right of way, some type of easement would have to be put on that property, or the Pittmans would get 10 foot of it and they can put their driveway on that 10 foot. It is complicated in that it's split equal distance to either side.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Matthews.
Brian, or maybe John, I'm not sure that we can legally landlock a piece of property with today's standards. Now, I don't see how we can do that. Is there something that allows us to landlock a piece of land, whether it's the owner or not?
Sometimes we don't subject to combining property.
But yeah, we can't. But we can no longer put conditions on mandatory referrals.
Okay.
So we haven't done it in the past. I think the applicant can probably answer some of the questions that you may have. But just looking at it, it would landlock several properties, even though they're owned by the applicant itself as of today.
Yes, I mean, I have a problem with doing that. And even if they were combined, those three on the top, if they were combined, it's still one big property that's landlocked. So unless we would still allow a little bit of a right of way that touches that. Anyway, that's my thought.
It wouldn't be landlocked, would it? It looks like there's access down here on the bottom piece.
What, this one here?
Yep.
There's a little sliver right there. I'm not sure how wide that is. It does touch, it wraps around the property owned by the Morales family.
Yeah, I was talking about the upper three.
All these three here.
Yeah. The picture you're showing looks like one end of the alley is paved and the other end is
this is gravel almost. This side up here is paved, I think back to the Lawson's property right through here somewhere.
so the pavement comes off of which
comes off of Wilson Avenue and comes back around, at least to their house. I'm not sure how much further the pavement actually goes
Okay.
beyond the Lawson's house. That's something the applicant can answer.
All right.
Are we ready to hear from the applicant? All right, Emily, can you bring them in?
Going to unmute Debbie Lawson. You should now be allowed to speak.
Debbie, can you hear us?
Well, Mr. Chair, she was just on the call and now I don't know that I see her name. Oh, here we go. Looks like Debbie, you're on here twice, 2 names, so I'll try to unmute the other one. Debbie, are you present, Debbie?
I am. Can you all hear me?
We can. Thank you, Debbie.
Okay, good. I apologize. I contracted COVID last Thursday and I don't feel wonderful, but trying to keep up with you all.
I'm sorry to hear that.
Thank you. The main reason that we applied to do this, we purchased this property over the period of the years about 1996 or 97 through current. We've added pieces of property to it. We had enough eventually to turn it into a green belt. We have horses on a good majority of the property. When we built the property, we did put in a paved driveway from the Wilson Inn up to the house, a little past the house, but we opened up the unopened road connection to Sawyer because it is a flat end. Our driveway is very steep. And during snow and ice, it's almost impossible to get up it. And for construction, it was almost impossible to get up it. So we've been back here. We moved into the residence in 2001. Okay, so our main problem is we have strangers. Every Tom, Dick, and Harry drives from the gravel in, coming in and goes out our paved driveway. So we have total strangers that come through here on our personal property. And sometimes they run off of it. They make ditches on the side. We've even had tractor trailers come through here through our very own driveway. It is a security issue. This unopened road would not even be opened if it weren't for us. When we started to build, we bulldozed the unopened road open again, and we maintain it with gravel. Now, our other question is, if we had all of this property that we own resurveyed into one lot, not divided into these 3 or 4, how many it shows on the plat, to close it, would that make a difference?
That's a good question, and I think one we'll definitely want to hear from staff on.
There is, there's access to, there's power down Wilson Avenue all the way, we're at the dead end, and there's power all the way down and water all the way down. And then there's, of course, power and water on on Sawyer. So our power is underground and probably came in through Wilson up the hill. I can't remember, but I'm guessing that's how it happened. We connected to gas from Sawyer back in 2001 when we connected and paid for that ourselves to have a pipe put in from Sawyer to our close to the house. So we basically taken care of all this all by ourselves and have had no problems back here except strangers driving through. And we have grandchildren and animals and dogs and all that stuff. And I mean, it's just like you all wouldn't want strangers pulling in and out of your driveway. So that's the issue is the security, basically.
Okay. And you've talked to some of your neighbors about this, is that right?
Yes, we did. The Pittmans are our daughter and son-in-law, and they, where you're pointing the little red dot, that's been recently purchased, probably 2 years ago, year and a half ago. It was offered to us to purchase, but we didn't really need that. And we asked the seller if they minded if our daughter and her husband bought it, and they said no. Do you see where it connects to Sawyer? So they have access. We wouldn't. Well, let me back up. We've talked to the Pittmans, the Dentons, the Harveys. They know we're not closing it with a gate. They would all still have access to the property. We're not trying to close it like nobody gets in here. We're just trying to keep the public that we do not know out with a sign. The Harveys, we have talked with them. They seemed fine with it because their main driveway is from Sawyer. It is not from this unopened road. They drive down this little unopened road sometimes to have a little dirt access to their through their side yard or into their pasture behind their house. That's not a problem. That's not a problem whatsoever. The Dentons, their main driveway comes up off of Wilson. It's a paved driveway off Wilson. And they also put a driveway that can connect to this unopened road. They're also in agreement to close it. And they do know that, like I said, we are not intending to close the road to not like put gates up. We are not intending to put a gate up. So honestly, the Dentons have the same problem we do. Their driveway is extremely steep. So their only way to get out in the ice and snow is this gravel road. So, and we've told many of residents on Wilson, when a tree goes down, that they are welcome to come up through our driveway and go out the flat end from time to time. But like I said, it's really a security issue for us. It just gets, we just don't care for strangers pulling in all the time.
Okay. That's helpful.
I have a
Commissioner
question,
Martin,
Chairman.
and then Councilman Ledford.
Thank you.
Did you call on me, Mr. Collier?
Yes, Mr. Martin.
I have a couple of questions for Brian. The applicant had mentioned something about Greenbelt. Are any of those parcels in the Greenbelt, or don't you have to have 15 acres to get a Greenbelt exemption?
I think you're right. It's either 15 or 20. I don't remember. That's through the tax assessor's office. We don't have records of that. But I think it's either 15 or 20 acres. It doesn't have to be one parcel, as long as it's under one ownership. You can apply and get the Greenbelt status.
Do you all
Is
have
it one of
the,
those things that you can get where they have to be contiguous like they are, those three that are on the north side of that road? Or if I own 10 acres here and 10 acres 2 blocks down, does that give me the 20?
I don't know, Mr. Martin, that's through the tax assessor's office. I don't know how that works. That's really just more or less tax purposes. I'm not sure if it has to be contiguous or if it's just scattered throughout. It makes more sense that it is contiguous under one ownership.
Well, the
Right,
reason
I
I
don't
ask
know.
that is because if you abandon that road there, the Lawsons would certainly have a larger contiguous parcels of land that perhaps makes them eligible for the green belt. I'm just asking the question. I'm not saying they do or they don't. I'm asking. And
I think she's in the green. I think she mentioned she's in the green belt now, is my understanding.
yes,
okay, so that has no bearing on that.
no.
Okay. And then I guess my question is, would the Harveys have to, Mr. Stoltz, I'm asking you as our staff, would the Harveys be required to have another driveway built? Or would this not impact them as far as a driveway and access at all?
No, it sounds like from the applicant, Ms. Lawson, she said they do have a driveway off of Sawyer Road. As long as they have a driveway to their property from Sawyer Road, they technically have access. Just on the map, it looks like there was another like gravel access point to the driveway back here. If they want to continue to use that, if this is a 40-foot right of way, they get 20 foot of that right of way because it's split equal distance to either property owner on either side. So the Dentons and Harveys and Pittmans would all get half of that right of way. So in
Okay.
theory, they would have 20 foot of that right of way to be used as their access. All
And
this
then-
would not go to the Lawsons.
Right. And then I guess my final question, just for clarity, I understand the applicant say they didn't intend to put a gate and all that. And I get that. But legally, if we abandon this, right there where that little S is in the road, if you could, right there. If they wanted to at some point, why couldn't they put a gate there? They would own everything on both sides.
They could. That's
Okay.
what I'm thinking. Just by the closure itself, that's, as she mentioned, putting the sign up, that's probably not going to still stop the traffic from coming through. Most likely the fence or the gate would be the only way to really stop traffic from coming through that if they've been using it for years. Is that
Right.
cut through? So I think at some point to effectively do that, a gate would probably most likely have to go up at some point along this right of way.
Right. And we don't know who's going to own the property 50 years from now. And I know my neighborhood has signs up that say no soliciting, then doesn't do any good.
Right.
And I have all kinds of strangers, people that I don't know that are riding on the public road here. So I get that whole argument about that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's all the questions I've got.
Thank you, Commissioner Martin. Councilman Ledford and then Mr. Farman.
Thank you, Chairman. Ms. Lawson, can you hear me okay?
I can.
My question is, it sounds like that section of road you're asking for to be abandoned, you have personally maintained for quite some time?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Has-
For 20 years.
20 years, so no one has come from the county or town of Walden to really do any work on that road?
None whatsoever.
Okay. My next question, and one of the concerns I heard from my colleagues was, and I think you've answered this, but can you reaffirm that the Harvey, Denton, and Pittman, I understand the relationship there. You wouldn't be denying them access to their property at any point.
Oh, no, absolutely not.
Okay, so
No.
it sounds like you're just trying to, you've got a small access area that has been probably mislabeled or used. I can understand your concern, and I can also understand your investment in maintaining that road. This will be because we can't put conditions on a mandatory referral, but I'm wondering at the next level if your town of Walden can. That question goes to Brian Schultz. Can an alder person put a condition on this that access be granted to adjacent properties?
That's my understanding.
Okay, then that helps me understand, I think, where I need to be. Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to clarify with something real quick. This is a 50-foot right of way. If it is abandoned, ultimately by the town of Walden, 25 foot will go to the people on the left-hand side, which is primarily the Lawsons and the Harveys. And then the other 25 foot would go to the Pittmans and the Lawson. Mr. Morales, since he does not abut that right of way, would not be eligible to receive any of that right of way.
And Brian, do you know if Mr. Morales has connection off of Sawyer right now?
I don't believe so. I believe he actually connects off Wilson Avenue.
Oh, okay. Mr. Farmer?
You, Debbie.
Yes, sir.
Let me try to maybe talk you through a little bit of this, and can I give you a little bit of advice?
Sure.
So this can be a little confusing. So, and I don't know if you heard my question earlier before you came on, but what I asked, and I want to be clear in what you're asking for in your request. So if we just approve this request and then Walden approved this request, then what is now a public right of way, so people are driving through there, they actually have the right to drive through there now, and I completely understand your request, and I'm trying to help you get there. But if it was approved as is, that would mean there on the Sawyer side, the Harveys would get half and the Pittmans would get half, and you would no longer have that access anymore. The Dentons would get half, and then you would get half on your side, and then so on. So it gets what you're requesting really gets rid of the access altogether. So my advice to you is I would get all the parties together, and I would contact a professional surveyor or someone like that to help you with this request, because really, if you had come in today and with the Harveys, the Dentons, and the Pittmans and said, we all 3 or 4 would like to abandon this, and we have a private agreement for an easement between our families and landowners we've worked that out, then it would be a much easier yes.
Okay.
Now, I don't know if we do something today to go ahead and send you to Walden and you fix it, but at Walden, but they're going to run into the same problems here, because really what I hear you say that you and other people are using that access. And if we grant your request, you really won't have access anymore.
That's good. That's a good point.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Matthews?
Yes, I agree with your analysis there, Jason, and from a surveyor standpoint. But I was going to recommend this. There at the line, the dividing line of Denton and Lawson, right there, let's stop it right there, close it from there to the east. And there, that way Lawson, Denton, Pittman, Harvey all have their access, but no one can cut through. I think that's the point. You could have a gate there. You could you could even have a gate wherever you wanted. But to me, that would be the logical place to close it, and everyone would be happy.
I agree with that entirely, Mr. Matthews.
Yeah.
And if it is appropriate, I would make that motion.
Mr. Chairman, if I could just add a little to that. I understand the intent completely. One thing we worry about, it didn't always happen in the past, but one thing we try to do now is there's not really an appropriate turnaround. So anybody that comes up that public right of way to that gate is now going to have an issue turning around or getting back out without turning around in somebody's driveway. So not that couldn't be done. It's just we try to now do on our public roads, although this is town of Walden, to try to at least create some type of adequate public turnaround when you end a public road at a gate. So that just some advice, information.
Mr. Matthews made a motion to approve a right-of-way abandonment to the point from from Wilson Avenue to the Denton Lawson property line.
I'll
Did I
That's
second.
hear-
correct.
And Councilman Ledford seconded that. Is that correct?
Correct.
And Mr. Lehman, I appreciate that. Is there any other discussion on that motion?
Just for the record, to note where the stopping point is, so we're clear about that for the record.
It's that exact point, Denton Lawson property line.
I would be curious maybe what the applicant says to that. And of course, I don't know, to me, it just makes sense to get all the property owners on the same page and attempt to do that before we did this. But if the applicant's fine with it, I'll vote for it.
So Debbie, Mrs. Lawson,
Yes, sir.
do you understand what it is that's been made a motion?
Well, let me make sure. We have talked with them, but you would like for us to meet with the Harveys, the Pittmans, the Dentons again?
No, Mr. Matthews has made a motion, Councilman Ledford seconded it, to close the right of way as you requested from Wilson Avenue all the way to that where he stopped his red dot.
Okay.
So that portion would be closed. And the entire portion of the road would go to you. It would become your private means of egress, and you could gate it if you wanted to. It would no longer be all the way through a public right of way. But Todd Lehman made the comment that people might be able to come off of Sawyer and they would dead end onto that property, and you might consider how they would turn around if they had to, because they might not be able to go all the way through anymore. So that's the motion that's been made. And what Commissioner Farmer was wanting to understand is whether or not you find that to be acceptable, or whether or not you would like to request a deferral and meet with the Denton and Pittmans and Harveys to maybe come up with a better plan than that.
Okay, I see what you're talking about for sure. I wish my husband had been registered to speak. I think he can hear, he's just not registered to speak.
Mr. Chair, Ms. Lawson, you both are able to speak because you're the applicant. So if you'd like him to speak and answer right now, you're more than welcome to do that.
I wonder if he knows how to unmute. We are not in the same, we're not in the same
okay.
home right now because of because of COVID.
I understand. Let me see if I can find him.
Yes.
I don't see an Eddie
Yes.
Lawson logged in. Let me see if I can find him. What phone number would he potentially be?
He would be 423-240-1719.
Okay, just a moment.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask Brian a question?
Another comment is this road is through basically woods, and you are right that there would be there's no good place to turn around if we did put a gate there.
Somebody just raised their hand. I don't know if it's Mr.
I
Lawson
see
or
that
not.
Moto Z4.
Yes.
I'm gonna.
Councilman Ledford, did you have a question while we're trying to get her husband on the
I
line?
did for Brian.
Yes.
Brian, if we went with the Denton Lawson property line as proposed now, Ms. Lawson can come back with an agreement to Commissioner Farmer's point again and complete this action or request. That's
correct.
doable?
That'd be a new application. Once this goes on to town of Walden, we would need a new application to finalize the closure of the rest of this right of way.
Okay. So this kind of like gets us halfway there.
Yeah, this gets us through phase one, then phase two, if you will, be the second part.
Okay, so that's an option. I wanted Ms. Lawson to hear that. I think Commissioner Farmer made a really good point on that.
Okay.
This is Eddie Lawson. Can y'all hear me?
Sure.
What you have here there at the Denton property seems to me to be reasonable. you know, what we had prefer not to lose is, you know, from that point on out to Sawyer, which would continue during bad weather, allow us to, you know, access our property. Whichever.
You wouldn't lose the ability to use that just the same as you do now.
Okay. Okay. Seems reasonable. I mean, is this something that if we're okay with as far as y'all approving, then it still has to go through the town of Walden. So if we saw some hiccup or a problem with it in the way that we've got it laid out today, if Walden has to approve this thing, we still got one more step to where we could just basically, if we even wanted to go back and just leave it as it is today, we could do that. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Well, to me, that seems like the reasonable, you know, if y'all want to get, if something needs to be accomplished today to help y'all out later down the road, there at the Denton property seems to me to be perfectly reasonable. And like I said, if we need to have the other property surveyed and have those 4 or 5 lots of ours put under one plat, you know, we would not be past doing that.
Okay. All right. Well, we're going to take action today, and then you can follow this through as it goes through the town of Walden.
Okay.
Is there any more discussion on the motion and the second that's been made? All right, all in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Roll call.
Bailey,
Aye.
Ledford,
Yes.
Palmer, Levy's left to make Hyatt,
Yes.
Barone,
Yes.
Farmer,
Yes.
Lehman,
No.
okay, Martin,
Yes.
Coker,
Yes.
Matthews,
Aye.
Maybe,
Aye.
Hang,
Yes.
motion carries.
Mr. Chair, can I make a quick comment?
Councilman Ledford.
If the Lawsons are still on the line, I don't know if Mr. Lehman can answer this legally. Is it okay to put a sign at the end of that says road closed ahead or something to start to alert the public once that, and if it goes through the town of Walden?
Councilman, of course, it's in the town of Walden. There could be a no through traffic or dead end or some type of appropriate sign. Probably a lot of times you'll see on the end of a street sign, it'll say dead end. And so there's some of that type of standard signage on a road sign that I guess Walden could potentially do.
Okay, just trying to find a solution to the turnaround. I know what that was a concern of yours. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, may I also make a note to all the applicants for the remaining cases before we go to the next one?
Yeah, Emily.
Just a reminder, staff did ask all the applicants to register in advance so that we know whose name to look for to let you in to speak. However, if there are multiple people that are representing the applicant that would like to speak, you just need to let me know their name and so I can unmute their mic. That way, if we want to make sure that the applicant has all the appropriate people speaking that they need to describe their case. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily. All right, well, at this rate, we'll be here till 6 or 7 o'clock. So we'll try to pick up the pace a little bit. Next case on the agenda is case 2021-0002, and this is located at 4314 Bonnie Oaks Drive. And it's an application to rezone from R1 residential zone to M1 manufacturing zone, and has a staff recommendation to deny. Emily, is there any opposition present?
No, there's not, Mr. Chair.
Okay, and I'm assuming the applicant is present.
Let me verify.
And while
She
you're
is.
looking for the applicant, well, I want to make sure that the applicant is present prior to hearing the case.
She's here, Sabrina Janelle.
Okay, Mr. Schultz.
Need to unmute, Brian.
Yeah, this is case 2021-002, to request to rezone from R1 residential zone to M1 manufacturing zone. Proposed use is warehouse, storage, employee parking. vehicle and equipment storage / parking. It's about a little less than half an acre in size. It's actually, the address is 4314 Bonnie Oaks Drive. The property really does not front Bonnie Oaks Drive. It comes off of this private road called Watkins Terrace, but for addressing purposes, it's actually 4314 Bonnie Oaks Drive. Here's a view of the site. It's just behind this home. The site's right through these trees right here. You can see the top of the building. It's behind this home. This is actually the home that fronts Bonnie Oaks Drive. Here's a better view of the site. This is the home I just showed you on Bonnie Oaks Drive. Here's Watkins Terrace. Here's the structure, and the property is seeking the rezoning, this little metal outbuilding. This currently is zoned R1. Everything around this property is R1. Across Bonnie Oaks Drive to the north, that's where you start to see the heavier intensity zones like M1, O1. And so on this side of Bonnie Oaks, you can see this is all primarily R1. You do have a little R4 sitting here to the right. This is a church, but most of the heavier intensity zones and uses are across the street of Bonnie Oaks Drive. There is no zoning history on this property itself. Again, it's just showing you some of the adjacent property uses. You do have single family detached dwelling along Bonnie Oaks. There's a school. Then you have single family detached to the east, to the north, and then vacant to the west of this property. This is in the Highway 58 Community Land Use Plan, which was adopted in 2003. The designation for this particular piece of property is office use, which is like administrative offices, financial, business, and professional offices. Staff looked at this recommendation, looked at the land use plan for a recommendation. The proposal is not compatible with the land use plan, which recommends office type uses. The proposal is not compatible with adjacent land uses, as you just saw a few minutes ago, where single family detached dwellings and a school on this side of Bonnie Oaks Drive. Approving the M1 zone at this location in the middle of R1 would create a spot zone and would set the precedent for future heavier intense non-resident uses on this side of Bonnie Oaks Drive. So with that, staff recommends to deny the request to go to M2.
Thank you, Mr. Schultz. Any questions for staff before we hear from the applicant?
Sorry, that was M1.
Thank you. All right. Emily, we'll hear from the applicant.
Janelle should be able to speak.
Hi, my name's Sabrina Janot. The business address is 4314 Bonnie Oaks Drive. The main issue is we rented this warehouse space to expand our plumbing company. We're from Georgia, we live in Georgia, and we were unaware that it wasn't zoned for it. So currently the electricity is off the house in the front, which is 4320 Bonnie Oaks Drive. And there is a, we're connected in their breaker box in these people's homes. And our main goal, really, the only reason we're doing this is so we can get electricity to the building that's separated, which isn't being allowed right now by city inspectors. So we're very limited. We can't expand at this point. We're needing to hire employees and expand our business, but we don't have electricity for meetings and to actually hire a personnel to be here to answer phones because we don't have heat because we don't have the electricity that can generate enough electricity to run the heat and air unit. And that's really what our goal is. The only reason the M1 was brought up, the person that was in the position before Mr. Schultz recommended M1 because the owner of the property, the Jordans, they do not want this property accessible to the public, like for office use or for where someone can come in and, customers can come in and out, and we don't have that. It's just mainly for employees and to store excavating equipment, plumbing supplies and equipment, tools, things like that. And so honestly, if the M1 doesn't work, I'm not a zoning expert, so I don't know what would be more feasible for it, but they don't, like I said, they don't want ever to have, you know, customers or the public on the property other than employees. After we're gone, I know that they want, they own a company in Nashville that they lease buses to, you know, celebrities and things like that, where they can use them to travel for whatever reason. And I know he mentioned at one point being able to like temporarily store some of those quality high-end buses here temporarily, like once we're gone. And he just wants it set up where he would be able to do that. I don't know what a solution is to get it approved so we can have electricity so our company can flourish. You know, if someone has a better suggestion, we're open to it. We just need to get this resolved so we can get electricity so we can take our business forward.
Okay. Are there any questions for the applicant?
I have one, sir.
Councilman Ledford.
Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Janot, a question I ask of any applicant in the city. Have you spoken with the city council representative for that area, Councilman Gilbert, by chance?
No, I have not.
Okay. That would have been a really good idea to get an indication of where he was thinking with his familiarity in representing the area. I can say, reading the case and being the staff recommendation, I would be very, very in support of staff recommendation on this. So I know I won't be supporting it, but I want to offer you, if you mentioned you want to find a different route, that if you withdrew this case, you have a better option to come back in 30 days than if it were denied. So I just want to present that from my personal perspective, what I think in this particular case.
Thank you, Councilman Ledford. Are there any other comments or questions?
Mr. Chairman, this is staff, Brian. I'd like to clarify too on the electricity. I believe also the reason electricity is not turned on or made available to this structure is the use is not permitted in the R1 zone. So therefore they have to get a zone that would allow that use so the electrical inspections can turn the power on. Just want to clarify that.
Mr. Chairman, I have a quick question for staff, if I may.
Mr. Maybe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I understand the reasons that the applicant is requesting the M1, but had they requested a different zone, such as a commercial zone, would that have changed the staff's opinion or thinking on their recommendation?
No, I don't think so, because if you look just strictly at the map, the zoning map itself, there is no, on this side of the street of Bonnie Oaks, there is really no heavy or intense zone. The only other zone that I know, and John, correct me if I'm wrong, that would allow like outdoor storage to be like an M4 zone, warehouse and wholesale zone, to be the same situation, and there is no heavy, intense zones or uses on this side of Bonnie Oaks Drive.
Thank you.
Did that answer your question, Mr. Maybe?
It does, thank you.
Okay.
I'll just say to the applicant, I think you moving your business to Chattanooga is a really good thing, and we desperately need plumbing companies to do well and grow and expand. And so, you know, I suspect that what's about to happen is your request is going to be denied, and that's because, you know, as staff has suggested and recommended, it's not an appropriate zone. You know, being surrounded by R1, it is not it's not our desire for your business to suffer or, you know, to be hurt in any way, shape, or form, but ours is to look at the current zone around the property and how, you know, your request would impact those properties, you know, long into the future. And so just please know that I know that I speak for everybody on Planning Commission when, you know, I say that we want for your business to be successful. I think that this is probably the wrong location for your business. Certainly based on the zoning, it's the wrong location. So please don't take this as anything other than the fact that this is the wrong wrong place for M1 in the middle of a neighborhood. So with that, I'll entertain a motion.
May I say something right quick?
Yes, please.
I know, like to the, I think it's to the east, this R4, that's right here. That is actually a funeral home. That is not a church. They also, you know, they have a crematorium there. It's a funeral home. So, I mean, I'm not exact, and they're open to the public for business. They have people, I actually use that funeral home whenever I have had a family member die. I don't know if that's zoned appropriately, but, you know, and then I know that the intent for the current landowner, the parcels that are behind this warehouse right here, they're, from my understanding, in the process of trying to purchase those properties. I don't know where they are with that, because like I said, I'm just, you know, representing for this. I don't know if that will change things, or, you know, because we've invested a lot of money already in this property, and you know, we're a budding, you know, plumbing company, so having to find another location will do substantial financial harm, and we may not be able to continue. So I don't know if that's, you know, if y'all would take that into consideration. You know, we really just need electricity to be able to conduct, you know, our business, to have employees here.
Well, I will say that
I think it's a shame that the city could even prevent an establishment, even a home or someone, from having electricity whenever, you know, it meets code.
well, it currently doesn't meet code because of the fact that it's being used in a way that doesn't meet the current.
I mean, electrical code, I'm sorry. I mean, for
So,
electrical.
Councilman Ledford suggested, and I think wisely, that you withdraw the case and possibly try to come up with another plan so that you can move it forward. I don't know what that would look like, and we're not really in the position to advise on that, but it could be worth you considering withdrawing this case rather than it being denied. And you could circle back with the RPA staff and try to see if there's any way for your business to move forward. I'm not sure that there is, but you might find a more appropriate zone than M1. So if you wanted to withdraw the case, rather than it being denied, you would just simply have to ask for it to be withdrawn. But I do suspect that Planning Commission is about to make a motion to deny, if that's any consolation.
Okay, so if it's denied, then it can detrimentally affect something in the future, correct?
It can.
Okay, well, I'll withdraw the motion then.
Move to withdraw.
Okay, so we do have a motion to withdraw. Can I get a second?
Second.
We got a second from Commissioner Martin, and to Mrs. Janelle, I would just encourage you to follow back up with our PA staff and the property owner and see what the options are, and maybe land development office as well, to try to figure out if there's any available options for you. With that, we do have a motion, and it has been properly seconded to allow the applicant to withdraw their case. Any discussion? All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Bailey,
Apologies. Aye.
Ledford,
Yes.
Hyatt,
Yes.
Barone,
Yes.
Farmer,
Yes.
Lehman,
Yes.
Martin,
Yes.
Coker,
Yes.
Matthews,
Aye.
Maybe,
Aye.
Payne.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Bridger. Next case on the agenda is case 2021-0003. And this is located at 802 Hamilton Avenue. And it's an application to rezone from M2 Light Industrial Zone to C2 Convenience Commercial Zone, and has staff recommendation to deny the applicant's request. And the staff recommendation is to approve UGC, Urban General Commercial Zone, with conditions. rather than the C2 convenience commercial zone. So Emily, or I guess Karen, either one, is there any opposition present?
There is not, Mr. Chair.
Okay, and I'm assuming the applicant's present.
He is.
Okay. And I'd like to ask the applicant one question before we hear from staff. Can we bring the applicant on?
Sure. I'm going to unmute Mr. Alan Outlaw. Alan, you should be allowed to speak, and then if necessary, I can unmute Chad Walmack and Jay Simpson.
Okay.
Thank you. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah, Alan, we can. I've got one question for you, and just so you understand, I want to ask you this question, and I want you to answer it, and then depending on your answer, we'll hear from staff and deliberate. But what staff has recommended, have you seen their recommendation?
Yes, I have.
Okay, and so you know it's to deny the C2 convenience commercial zone and approve the UGC urban general commercial zone with conditions.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And you're familiar with the two conditions?
Yes, sir.
And would you find this to be acceptable?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Move to approve staff recommendation.
We have a motion to approve the
Second.
recommendation. And Mr. Payne, it needs to be with conditions.
Yes, with conditions.
Okay, and we do have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, and then we do have a second from Mr. Maybe, motion from Mr. Payne. And before we move forward, Mr. Outlaw, I do have one more question for you. Is there anything else you wish to say? Because you did get cut short. You do have a motion to approve the request.
Yeah, that's fine. We approve and we are very grateful for the recommendation. The initial C2 was preliminary. I believe that the UGC is perfect for us.
Okay, thank you. Any discussion on the motion? All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Bailey,
Aye.
Ledford,
Yes.
Hyatt,
Yes.
Jerome,
Yes.
Farmer,
Yes.
Lehman,
Yes.
Martin,
Yes.
Coker,
Yes.
Matthews,
Yes.
Maybe,
Aye.
Payne.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Bridger. Next case on the agenda is case 2021-005. And this is the 803,000 block of Reed Lake Road and Fire Pink Trail. And this is an application for special permit for residential plan unit development. And this case has a staff recommendation to approve with conditions. And Emily, Brian, John, I understand we have quite a few in opposition.
That is correct. We do have a couple of people who have signed up or will be the representatives for a majority of the group. We have those lists. They do have a presentation that I have at the end of my presentation for them to go through. We have 4 that I'm aware of that will represent most of the people. Again, we have well over 30 plus people who've signed up to speak. So, it's a total of 9 minutes. It'll be awful difficult.
Well, that's about 15 seconds apiece.
Right.
So we can just move really quick. Okay, and then I'm assuming we've got the applicant present. Who's speaking?
We do, Mr. James Pratt and
Okay.
Ian Blackmore.
Okay, so we'll go ahead and hear the staff presentation. Mr. Schultz.
Okay. This is case 2021-0005. It's not a rezoning case. It's a special exceptions permit for residential planned unit development for residential development on this property. Overall acres of this development is about 50.24 acres. Proposed number of units is 225, and that equals a density of overall gross of 4.48. Location of this request is 850 Reeds Lake, part of 1001 Reeds Lake Road, and the 4600 block of Fire Pink Trail. And I've highlighted in the screen, it's a very large site, so it's hard to get on the map so you can see it in one view, but this is the general location highlighted in the yellow. Mountain Creek Road is just to the left of the screen. And then Reeds Lake Road bisects the property here in the middle. Just to give you an overview, this used to be the former Corey golf course. It's currently zoned R1. This little C2 portion was what was the old clubhouse for the golf course. That is not part of the request. It zigzags around that. So everything in this request is zoned R1. Adjacent zones are R1. I do have R1 PUDs to the south and west. You have R1 PUD, which is indicated by the stripes. That means that's a PUD. You have R1 PUD just to the north. To the southwest is RZ1, R3 with a PUD, and to the southeast is RTZ and RT1. So this is the zoning of the area. Again, this property is zoned R1. It's not a rezoning of the property. There is some zoning history on this property, and way back from 1977. Again, just as a reminder, this C2 is not part of the request, but I want to discuss just what's happened over the years on this site. In 1977, this clubhouse was rezoned from R1 to R4 in 1977 with the clubhouse. And it was originally, this overall site was originally part of a PUD. So 1977, when it was rezoned from R1 to R4, the clubhouse was removed from the PUD. This is the PUD case or PUD plan that was submitted back in 1977. This is the old Montclair Properties PUD. Here's Mountain Creek Road in the middle of the screen. The way this is plan's oriented, it's hard to see. Here's Mountain Creek Road running west to east, Reeds Lake Road running north to south, and here was the clubhouse. So that clubhouse was removed from the PUD back in 1977. Following that, in 1977, that same year, the clubhouse was rezoned from R1 to C1. And then in 2002, we had several zones like C1 and C6. Those zones were very similar to the C2 zone that the city of Chattanooga had on the books. So it was a mass downzoning or rezoning from that C1 and C6. All those zones were removed from the zoning code and rezoned to C2. So that's why that C2 is sitting there. Back from 2002, that clubhouse was rezoned from C1 to C2 because those zones no longer existed, which is the C1 and C6. Most recently in 2018, we had a request to rezone this C2 portion to R4 in 2018. The application was actually withdrawn at Planning Commission level. The remainder or the entirety of this property was also seeking a special exceptions permit for a PUD as part of that zoning case in 2018. That also was withdrawn by the applicant at the Planning Commission level in 2018. Following that, the City Council directed Planning Commission to prepare a case to rezone this C2 with no conditions to C2 with conditions, subject to the office use and any use consistent with the former C1 highway commercial zones that were originally adopted back in 1977. So there's a lot of history on this particular piece of property and site. Just adjacent to this site, off Tiger Lily Trail, this property here received a special permit for planned unit development in 2001 for 73 units. So you see there's a lot of history, a lot of high density development along south of Reeds Lake Road. Just to give you an overview of what's adjacent to this property, to the southeast, that is single family residential attached. To the northeast is single family detached residential. Directly north is multifamily condo units, and then further north beyond that is a single family residential subdivision. Further north are large lot single family detached dwellings. To the west is multifamily residential. To the west here, you have single family attached and detached. This was a PUD, so they're changing some of the uses in there. Then to the southwest is multifamily. So you can see it's a mix of uses between single family detached and attached and multifamily apartments in this general location. There is no adopted land use plan for this particular piece of property, so we rely on the comp plan, which is adopted back in 2016. It identifies these areas as level 1 and level 2 intensity levels. Level 1 includes these areas defined by the 100-year flood hazard area. They are culturally, environmentally, or aesthetically significant with sparsely little development. And also at level 2 is characterized as sparsely to moderately populated with development patterns generally consistent with both large tracts of undeveloped land, residential subdivisions, and limited small-scale commercial industrial developments. This property, a portion of this PUD on the south side of Mountain Creek Road is located in the flood hazard area. The darker blue is the floodplain and the light blue is the floodway. In the floodway, no development can occur unless you get a no-rise certificate from FEMA that any development or impacts on that stream will not significantly raise the floodway. So really the floodway, you have to stay out of that. You can develop in the floodplain, again, which is the blue, as long as you elevate above the base flood elevation. Just as a reminder, as far as zoning cases, civil engineering plans are not required for rezoning or special permit request. If the special permit is approved, the next phase of development is to submit subdivision plats and civil engineering plans. Also, prior to land disturbing permits being issued and clearing and grading occurring on the site, civil engineering plans must be submitted to the Land Development Office for review and compliance with all adopted city codes and regulations, including stormwater management requirements. As this part of the stage of development, we don't review, Planning Commission has no authority to review stormwater requirements. Any development, clearing, and disturbance in designated floodways, as I mentioned, is prohibited unless FEMA approves a no-rise certificate or letters of map amendments are approved by FEMA. Development, clearing, and disturbance is permitted in the floodplain with approved development permits and elevation certificates granted by the city of Chattanooga. Again, that's beyond this phase, that all these steps here occur if the zoning change is approved, or sorry, the special permit is approved. So we'll go through the PUD plan. Overall, it's 50 something acres in size. Proposed number of units is 225, and that equals a density of 4.48 dwelling units per acre. Again, based on the PUD requirements, the density is based on gross and not net. So again, based on gross and the number of units, the density is 4.48 dwelling units per acre. We'll look at these in what we call segments. Segments 1, 2, and 3. These are segments just to the west or left of Mountain Creek Road and just to the right of Mountain Creek Road along Reeves Lake. Segments 1, 2, and 3 has a total number of units of 85, and that equals a density of 3.25 dwelling units per acre. Segment 1, this is just north of the clubhouse. This area is designated as open space. On the PUD plan, there are no structures proposed in this segment. As you can see, they have trees, and this is the post oak tree that's been in the paper in Chattanooga over the years. So this is the stream that comes down through here. You can see the buffer, which is indicated in dark green along that stream. It should be noted that the dedicated open space areas, including this segment, does not prevent residential structures from being built in those areas. If this is approved and the developer comes back or another developer comes back, they have the option of going through this process again and developing this with residential, but it would go back through that entire process. But based on the PUD plan being submitted today, there are no structures shown in this portion of the segment of phase 1. Also important to note, there is no regulation on the books that would prohibit clearing and grading within this open space or the removal of that post oak tree. We just don't have anything on the books that would prevent that. Just a closer view of what that looks like. Again, there's no dwellings proposed. You do see the trees, the post oak. Here's the stream that comes from the bottom of the mountain through the property. As you see, the dark green is the buffer along that stream. Continuing, working our way towards Mountain Creek Road, this is segment 2. This area contains 8 attached townhomes, dead ending at a cul-de-sac off Mountain Creek Road and Reeves Lake Road. There's no development shown in the stream buffer, and there's a walking path throughout this segment. If you look at the stream, there's no development occurring within that stream buffer, which is indicated by the green, darker green color. Everything in light green is undisturbed / open space. Here's a closer view of that site. This portion has a proposal of 33 units in this section of Mountain Creek Road. Finally, we're crossing Mountain Creek Road. This is part of segment 3. This area contains 8 attached townhomes, which is similar to the development form across the street, just to the south of Reeves Lake Road. The PUD plan shows structures not located in the floodway. You can see the floodway is right here and here. These 2 dashed lines are the floodway, so they're located outside the floodway. This other dashed line is the floodplain. There is a walking path throughout this segment, which is this gray line that comes through here and connecting you to the Mountain Creek Road. That is a pedestrian parkway. We'll talk about this in a few minutes, but this is to the north here is the R1 piece of property. Staff is recommending a type A buffer along this shared property line, which is a 30-foot landscape buffer starting from Mountain Creek Road and extending for a distance of 300 feet where the townhomes abut the adjacent R1 zone property. So staff is recommending a type A buffer along this shared property line with this residential house to the north. Here's a closer view of this same segment. Again, it's showing 52 dwelling units. You can see, again, this dashed line here is the flood plain. These two dashed lines are the floodway. Segment 4 is the last segment down Reeds Lake Road. This area contains multifamily dwellings or more townhomes. It's not apartments, it's townhomes, which is similar to adjacent existing apartments and residential densities. The PUD plan does not show structures inside an existing power line easements. There's easements, TVA power line easements that come across this property. You can sort of see them right here. Here's the power line easements to the south, and to the north is a power line easement. You cannot put structures within those power line easements. You can put streets, so the developer is staying out of that. One thing to indicate on this section, they're proposing 140 dwelling units just on this phase. This phase has a density, if you're looking at strictly this phase, it's 5.8. But again, based on the PUD requirements, its overall gross density, which is 4.48, which is in line with a typical R1 zoning designation. As you can see on this PUD plan or segment, this is the floodway that comes through here. There are some structures in this floodway, which is not allowed or permitted unless a no-rise certificate is approved by FEMA, or a letter of map amendment or revision is approved by FEMA. It's my understanding the developer is going through that phase right now to get a letter of map amendment or map revision to change that floodway. And if that's the case, the floodway will shift to along this greenway buffer. Therefore, all the structures are removed from the floodway if that's approved by FEMA. If not, those structures in the floodway will have to be removed. Again, just as a reminder, this gross overall site is about 50 acres in size, a density of 225 units, equals a density of 4.48, which is in keeping with R1 residential zone. The max density in R1 PUD is 5, so it's below that maximum density. I also looked at adjacent densities just as a comparison to give Planning Commission just a review of what that looks like. This is the proposed PUD plan along Reeds Lake Road in the yellow, highlighted in the red. These are rough estimates. I counted based on Google Maps here, 77 units highlighted in the red with an acreage of 12.9. This is along Fire Pink Trail and Westview Road. That is a density of 5.96 dwelling units. This is a little further to the north. This is all single family detached dwellings. I counted 29 units in this phase highlighted in the red. It has an acreage of 9.2. That density equals 3.04 dwelling units per acre. This is directly to the north of the property across Reeds Lake Road. Based on the PUD plan submitted, I'm using their numbers. It's hard to tell how many units are actually in this building. On the PUD plan submitted, it shows 22 units with an acreage of 12.14. That equals a density of 1.7 dwelling units per acre. This is further north along Reeds Lake Road. This incorporates this single family detached dwelling that one of the speakers was speaking on today, as well as I think it's a Spring Lake residential subdivision, including this little red area. That's about 71 units in this red box. Acreage is about 34.2, and that equals a density of 2.07. Looking to the west of this site, again, here's Reeds Lake Road, just in the middle. To the left of the site, that's 65 units, acreage of 6.4 with a density of 10.1 dwelling units per acre. Just south of this site, along Tiger Lily, that's 57 dwelling units on an acreage of 11.3. That adds a density of 5.07. Further south of Tiger, we're just at Tiger Lily right here. We're now further south. This is 54 dwelling units with an acreage of 8.43. That equals a density of 6.4. And then a little bit further south, this is 120 units on an acreage of 18.5. That equals a density of 6.48. Just across Mountain Creek Road, here's the PUD plan just to the north or to the east of the screen. This has 11 units, including this single family home to the rear on an acreage of 1.12. That equals a density of 9.82. And then finally, these are large lot single family dwellings on larger lots. Here's Reeds Lake Road. Here's the clubhouse, Mountain Creek Road to the right, highlighted everything in red. I counted about 20 units on 64 acres. Again, these are larger lots. That's a 0.31 density for this general area located here. Staff looked at this recommendation based on adjacent land uses. There is a mix of residential land uses in the area, including single family detached and attached or townhomes and multifamily. The plan shows proposed townhomes that are adjacent to existing single family dwelling. So again, staff recommended a type A or 30-foot landscape buffer to protect the single family dwellings to the north. The proposed mixed residential development with a density of 4.48 dwelling units is compatible with adjacent land uses and densities. It is compatible with the development form, which you have a mix of single family attached and detached, as well as apartments to the southwest. One of the things the PUD does ask, the proposal provides on-site usable open space that is easily accessible to the PUD residents. The PUD plan shows approximately 21 acres or 42% of the site protected as open space. It is accessible from Reeds Lake Road or Mountain Creek Road. There is a walking path on the PUD plan that provides connectivity throughout the site. So on-site usable open space is provided in this PUD plan. So with that, staff recommends to approve with a condition. The proposal is compatible with adopted comp plan. Proposal is compatible with adjacent land uses development form. It is below the 5 dwelling units per acre gross for this site. The only condition the staff recommends is a type A buffer along the shared property line of tax parcel 108DB003.82, starting from Mountain Creek Road right away and extending south for a distance of 300 feet where the townhomes abut the adjacent R1 zone property. So staff recommends to approve this PUD request with condition.
Thank you, Mr. Schultz. Are there any questions for staff before we hear from the applicant?
I have one, Mr. Chairman.
Baby.
Brian, the comp plan lays out, and we've talked about this a lot. I think it's really a great aspect of your comp plan, the intensity levels.
Yes.
Can you just talk a little bit, if this is a question better addressed by Mr. Bridger, that's fine, but can you just talk a little bit more about the intensity levels and how they should apply to your recommendation for development?
Okay.
Yeah.
This would be quick. I'm gonna throw this off to John. John's better at describing those intensity levels. I believe he was one of the co-authors of that comp plan. He can do a better job than I can explaining that.
Can you hear me? Brian, as I recall, you report those with 1 and 2, right?
That's correct, 1 and 2.
So again, and that's overall description of intensity. When we don't have an area plan, we'll use the comp plan as a reference just to give us some indication of what the appropriate intensity. So if I'm not mistaken, level 2 is like, it is basically light, the moderate intensity development. It doesn't specify a particular density. In a case like this, where you do have some natural features like the creek and the floodplain, you know, what the comp plan is speaking to is trying to balance development with protection of those resources. And so I think in looking at this PUD plan, I think as you recall, we did have a PUD plan for this area several months, actually a year or so ago. And that prior plan actually developed a much more extensive part of those natural resource areas. This particular modification shows a lot more open space, particularly in the northern section of the development. It does, whereas before, I think we had some houses backing up to the creek along, what was the name of that road up? Reeds Lake Road. Those have been taken out. And to our knowledge, correct me right, Brian, they are staying out of the floodway for sure. And just some areas where there's some encroachment in the floodplain, but it's limited to a couple of the segments. So I think where staff was looking at it in terms of the intensity, it's balancing development in some areas with conservation in others. And then as Brian indicated, because you've already got a mix of housing types in this area, there's some precedence for mixing housing types at this location. And if you look at the overall proposal, where most of the apartments are south of Reeds Lake Road, there's a small node to the north, but most of the apartments are to the south. That's where you've got existing multifamily and townhouses. So staff, again, did not see a land use compatibility issue as it relates to the mix of units in this area. Hope that was helpful. It was a long answer, but.
Are there any other questions for staff before we hear from the applicant?
I have one, Chairman.
Councilman Ledford.
Thank you. Brian, can you talk a little bit, because being on council, obviously I've gotten the hundreds of emails regarding this, and I've read a great majority of them, and I'm looking for understanding. A lot of them are copy and paste, but I read through a great deal of them, and they keep referring to the word high density. But when you went through your presentation, I didn't hear the word high density. So,
Right.
I mean,
Yeah.
what are we looking at?
What we're looking at, and I don't know if they're talking about the development of form per se instead of the number of units. Again, we based on the PUD requirements, it's gross. If you look at gross, which is the overall acres, it equals 4.48. Without this PUD, it can be developed today based on the current zoning at 5 dwelling units per acre, which is the same as the PUD. The PUD does offer flexibility in that you can mix in townhomes, apartments, single family detached. One thing about the PUD, if approved, the developer, any developer moving forward, is locked into this site plan or PUD plan. You can come back and tweak it, but if you go from townhomes to single family, that's a staff approved. But going the other direction, consider if he wants to put in apartments, that's a major change and will require this process to start over again. Typically, higher density to us is anything above 12 to 13 dwelling units per acre. Would be considered higher density. If you look at the PUD R1, he's not rezoning anything. This is strictly an R1 developed piece of property. But by doing the PUD, that does provide flexibility in providing a different form of housing, such as townhomes. But in return, you have to provide open space, sidewalks. There's trade-offs. So I don't know if that answered your question without being
Yeah,
too
let's go
long-winded.
back to that. Let's go back to that. I think that's an interesting point. I'm trying to wrap my head around. So this is still going to be an R1.
Correct.
Okay. Which is what I read in the paper, read online through all the emails to keep it R1. So it still is R1. Now go back to that R1 comment. If it's developed right now as R1, what is the density level? What does it do to the density level?
Typically about 5. So if you look
Right.
look at 50 acres, you can do about 251 units gross based on the current zoning as it stands today.
But that would remove the ability for the open green space.
Correct. This whole site could be developed with dwellings.
So
you would lose most likely this green space here. You'd have to keep a buffer along these streams, of course, to stay out of the floodway. But this would be developed with homes. Anything that's probably open space now would probably be developed with homes.
Yeah, stop right there. That really interests me. So if it was not a PUD and that was not carved out to be, let's just say, left alone, that whole area could be developed as is without anything going on.
Correct.
Any action from this or city council.
That is correct. As of today, the property owner of this property could come in today without this PUD being approved and develop this as a typical single family subdivision. There's not a thing in the regulations that would prohibit that.
Okay.
The PUD would. The PUD puts this protection on it that it's now, once this is approved, going to be protected open space. Now, that doesn't mean 5 years from now, somebody could come back in and amend that PUD to now include townhomes or single family. But as of right now, he's not showing any structures in this area.
Okay. Unless a condition was placed on it?
You put conditions, or the PUD plan does, in essence, condition this to no dwellings. But if he comes back or anybody comes back, I want to come back, I purchased this, I want to put homes in here, that's considered a major change because it was shown as open space, meaning it has to go back to a public hearing process.
Okay.
Meaning city council approval and planning commission approval.
And okay. So R1 as it stands, more houses, complete removal of green space that is dedicated now. We can condition, and this is where I'm going, we can condition some of these, let's just call them open areas, specifically on paper. And I'm really kind of shocked that this didn't come from staff because of the importance. But let me go back to, okay, now let me go back to the beginning of this. This was presented in 4 segments, correct?
Well, it's presented, yeah, we staff broke it down to 4 segments just for review, but this is how it was presented on the screen today. And just keep in mind, I know where you're going with the conditions, but this is a PUD plan. This is the controlling document moving forward on any type of development. Unlike a typical zoning case where we have a site plan, those are just general illustration purposes. A PUD plan, you are in essence sort of locked in to what is being approved. Now you can tweak it through major and minor changes, but those major changes, which are changing the PUD boundary, changing the number of units, increasing the number of units, that's a major change, which has to come back through planning commission and ultimately city council. That's why we typically didn't put a condition in terms of the number of acres of green space, because this controlling document sort of controls that.
So if it was broken into 4 segments, and it's a lot to digest, it's a large piece of land and there's a lot of variables and each part has its own unique characteristics, could we not look at this in 4 different segments individually to allow for conditions with community input to drive each segment more towards, I guess, being able to focus more intently on each segment instead of looking at this in all 4 components at once? Is that an option?
Brian, I'll answer that.
Yeah, let John answer that.
It's one case. So there's still one case, but certainly you can customize conditions to each segment. So in your review, you can look at each, but just know that it's one request for this entire site. But yes, you can apply conditions like in any case in particular parts of a site, but it is one case.
But just keep in mind, this is a little different than typical site plan. This is a PUD plan. It is your controlling document moving forward on any other plans.
Right, which is why, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time.
Right. So for example, if they're showing undisturbed green space here, he could not come, or anybody could not come back in and put a home here. That would be considered a major change, meaning that would have to go back through the planning process, through planning commission and city council.
Yeah,
Can I jump in? I just want to make sure to keep things on track. We haven't heard yet from the applicant.
Yeah.
I think there's.
Okay, I've got a lot of questions about this as an overall package, and I just was asking if we looked at this segment by segment, would that be more beneficial to planning commission and the community and the applicant, because we could zero in on each segment. It just seems like a lot to digest, and I'm a little surprised we only came out with one condition. Okay, I yield, Chairman. Thank you.
Any other questions for staff before we hear from the applicant? Okay. Emily, can you bring the applicant into the meeting? The applicant will have 7 minutes, then we'll have 9 minutes to hear from opposition. I guess maybe I'll get a sense of how many people actually want to speak from opposition, but I'd love to go ahead and hear from the applicant.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I've just allowed Mr. James Pratt into the meeting to speak.
Can you hear me, Emily?
I can.
Thank you, Mr. Pratt.
I'll be real short. We think the plan speaks for itself. We don't see where it needs any conditions. We're putting conditions on ourselves by dedicating all of this green space. So the plan is a great plan, and our comments are real simple. We'd like to see you approve it as it is.
All right. Anything else?
No other comments from me.
Okay. Are there any questions for the applicant, or do we want to wait and hear from the opposition first? Okay, we'll hear from the opposition. Emily, we're going to take these, I guess, there's a few people that have been designated to speak. And then there's a lot of people that want to speak. And last I heard, and I'm not exaggerating, I think there were 40 people or more that were actually signed up to speak, not to be in attendance, but just to speak. And, you know, for those of you that are listening, that is just not going to happen. So we're not going to hear from 40 people today. This will be heard at City Council, and the City Council chairman could make the decision to listen to 40 or 50 people speak in opposition to a case, but we will not. We're going to hear from a couple people who have been designated to speak. I'm hoping that those people have some prepared notes and can keep those comments to, you know, 3 or 4 minutes. At the 9-minute mark, I'm going to stop the conversation, and then we're going to make a decision about who else wishes to speak. But we'll go ahead and Emily, can you answer one question for me? How many designated speakers are there?
We have, Mr. Chair,
I believe 4. Is it 4?
5
5, okay.
There's 5 people
from various groups. Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to limit those designated speakers to 2.5 minutes per designated speaker. So at the end of 2.5 minutes, your time's going to be up, and I'm going to interrupt you, and not because I'm rude or because I'm a jerk, but because 40 or 50 people signed up to speak. So that doesn't make me a jerk. That just means at 2 or 3 minutes apiece, we would be here for a couple hours listening to opposition. And then when asked to come up with designated speakers, rather than there being 1 or 2 designated speakers, we have 5. So at 2.5 minutes apiece, that means we're at 12.5 minutes just for the designated speakers. So with that, I will interrupt at 2 minutes and 30 seconds and ask you to wrap up the comments. So we'll go ahead and bring the first designated speaker in.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just for all those that have registered to speak, as a reminder, please, when it's your turn and I unmute your microphone, state your name and your address for the public record. Our first speaker is Jim Faulkner, so I'm going to unmute your microphone.
And while he's coming in, I'd like to say to all the applicants or the attendees who did sign up or send us emails, all your emails in opposition or support were shared with the Planning Commission members as of yesterday. So they have your comments via
That's
email.
a good point, Brian. Mr. Chair, there was no members of the public requested to speak in support, but you all received their written comments for both support and opposition to the proposal.
Thank you.
Jim, you should be allowed to speak now.
Yes, this is Jim Faulkner. I live on Mountain Creek Road, 4703 Mountain Creek Road, pardon. That's not me, but anyway. I live on Mountain Creek Road, 4703 Mountain Creek Road. I've lived here off and on for about the last 50 years. In 1971, I remember when this property was first initially allowed to be changed and put into a PUD to allow some apartments and condos to be built. They were built. As a requirement for those townhomes and condos, about 50 acres was put into a green space, a golf course, a buffer. That 50 acres stayed that way and it's still that way. Many apartments, many townhomes have been built around it since outside that 50 acres. And gross number of houses is quite a few. Over $100 million of investment has been put around this area. We counted on the greenway. We counted on this PUD that was initiated in about 1971. And certain aspects of it are still there. We still count on the bottom line is, when you build a PUD, how can you take the green space in the buffer zone that's made as an allowance for building some apartments and townhomes and then tear it up later and build some more apartments and townhomes? I don't get it. And neither do the thousands of people. There's also a lake in there and the many things in there that have been misrepresented. This is a spring and the road's flowing in front of it. And these are houses that have been built on top of it. This is by the same developer. This is the lake that he wants to tear out. This lake was in a TVA map in 1936. It's not related to the golf course. It was not built by the golf course. I'll yield the rest of my time. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Now I'm going to allow Steve Hunt. You should now be allowed to speak.
Thank you, Ms. Wood. Can you guys hear me okay today?
We can, Mr. Hunt.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks for allowing me to speak. My family and I live at 1027 Reeds Lake Road, just a few hundred yards up from the quarry property. We, like over 5,000 of our neighbors and supporters of Friends of Mountain Creek, oppose this PUD. We beg to differ about the intensity. Most of the area is rural, and most of the area lies with less than 0.5 units per acre. So this is about the appropriate land use, or in this case, inappropriate land use. As is shown on the plan, the subject property is Zone 1, and you can see that it's overwhelmingly surrounded by R1. And some folks might argue that the high density leaves smallest ecological footprint, but this holds true where services are available in close proximities to the residents. This is not the case here. As Mr. Schultz was pointing out, the density to increase, the math allows for 5 units per acre, but this property has 2 high voltage TVA transmission lines running through it. It's got a floodway and other topographic features that are also unbuildable. And to claim that as a gift of green space is quite disingenuous. This plan decimates the existing spring-fed ponds. So this low density and high density comparison, if you stood at the quarry property, which is highlighted in red, lower left on the low density side and upper right on the high density side. So if you stand at the quarry and look north, then you can't find any other land that's zoned other than R1 or A1 until you get out to where Mountain Creek Road intersects Highway 27. But as Mr. Schultz indicated, and as we see on the right-hand side of the page, there's a lot of high density to the south. So this is really about low density single family arguing up against the high density that this plan provides. We're quite rural in our neighborhood. We're slightly suburban in our neighborhood with Spring Lake East and Spring Lake West, but it is predominantly low density as indicated with the aerial on the left. And to put high density into it, even with R1 under the guise that the PUD allows, is just not right. As I said, many parcels have a density of less than 0.5 acres. Mr. Schultz, the next slide does show the additional 200 acre or 200 unit apartments that the applicant plans adjacent or close by to this one. It accesses Morrison Springs Road, and so it's not as terrible a drag on our infrastructure, but the water quality issues that will be compounded by this are amazing. I just want to say a couple of things, if I might. I'll finish up here, Mr. Chairman. that the new Walden's Ridge Park, I'm a big fan of North Chick Conservancy. I just don't want to pay the price of destroying the land around it to add a 14th apartment complex and 100 homes crammed next to it. North Chick doesn't live here. We do. We hope that you will side with the residents of the area. And in keeping with the RPA definition of a PUD, PUD is designed to be a collaboration between the residents and the developer. And we've not heard a single thing from the developer about this PUD. So please don't break your own rules. We respectfully ask that you deny the application until the developer engages the people in the community that live here. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Hunt.
Mr. Chair, I'm now going to bring in Bob Geyer. And also, as a reminder, for those speaking, please state your name and address for the record. Bob, you should be allowed to speak. Bob Geyer.
Can you hear me, Emily?
I can now.
Okay, good. Thank you. My name is Bob Geyer. I live at 4143 Quarry View. I am an engineer and was a member of the advisory committee to the RPA that reviewed the need for rules governing steep slopes and floodplain development. What I am about to describe illustrates the need for regulations for covering floodplain development. Can you skip slides here? All right, one more. Okay, good, thank you. Nope, go back. There we are, thank you. Here's a story of two developments and how filling the floodplain next to them will increase their risk of flooding. The images of the 50-year-old FEMA analysis overlaying Gizmo 5 for the quarry. Notice how the light blue floodway ends abruptly and arbitrarily at the boundary of the Spring West subdivision. These residents have unassessed flood risk. Next slide, please. Spring Lake West. This image shows the result of flooding behind homes on White Springs Drive. Water reached the foundations of these two homes. Next slide, please. Spring Lake West, again, the other bank and the opposite side of the creek. These images were taken during Easter of 2020. Mountain Creek takes out another fence here and reaches the foundation of these homes on Creek Drive. Next slide, please. All the quarry property has interconnected subterranean water, and several townhomes in Mountain Creek Trails 2 have springs underneath them. Homeowners have installed expensive mitigation, including drain tiles, sump pumps, dehumidifiers, encapsulation of subfloors, in some cases in response to mold. As the development was being completed, surface water diversion created problems for the completed homes next door. These homeowners have borne great expense to rework drainage, and some of their problems are as yet unremedied. Next slide, please. Reed's Lake. The TDEC required hydraulic determination report commissioned for this project has had several errors identified. At expense to Friends of Mountain Creek, engineers have been hired and the original determination backed down in a few areas. One area that is not yet resolved is Reed's Lake. FOMC has located U.S. Geological Survey drawings showing Reed's Lake existed back in the 1930s, and that map was shown earlier by Jim Faulkner. Longtime residents will test that Reed's Lake existed here prior to 1920. The envisioned hydraulic determination incorrectly hangs their hat on the 2015 Corps of Engineers report that states that Reed's Lake is an artificial lake constructed with the golf course. Again, this is incorrect. Reed's Lake is waters of the U.S. and cannot legally be filled in or relegated to a muddy detention pond.
Hey, Bob, this is Ethan. How much more time are you going to need?
1 minute.
You've got 1 more minute.
Okay, conclusions. Next slide, please. The FEMA analysis is inaccurate and outdated. Several large areas of the floodplain along Mountain Creek have already been filled in and built upon with minimal area set aside for retention. Built up and now impervious acreage includes the high and elementary schools, buildings and parking lots, Horse Creek Farms, Spring Valley, and on and on. The proposed PUD eliminates many more acres of permeable surface where it is needed most. The entire area south of Mountain Creek Road near Reed's Lake is very low and currently serves as retention space to protect residents in Spring Lake West. The residents across the street in Mountain Creek Trails have enough water issues. Will building up this space redirect springs in their direction? The property north of Mountain Creek Road has multiple springs, including Morrison Springs, Reed Springs at the foot of Signal Mountain, and the S-shaped pond. Again, this subterranean water is connected. Building here could result in the same problems as those being experienced by the unsuspecting buyers in Mountain Creek Trails 2. It would be irresponsible to approve plans like this because it will put many current residents at increased flooding risk, and it will perpetuate water problems for many. Brian Tucker is the next speaker. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. I'm going to bring in Brian Tucker. Brian?
Hey, can you hear me?
We can.
My name is Brian Tucker, and I live at 4216 Mountain Creek Road. And like my neighbors, I oppose this PUD. I would love it if the applicant would build a subdivision with single-family homes as the current zoning allows. I disagree with the comments the applicant just made. I believe there should be several conditions placed on it. Staff did not mention this, but the density at my personal residence is 0.31 dwellings per acres, and that's adjacent to this property at hand. Let's go to slide 14. That's where I start, I think. There have not been studies done to show the effects of the applicant's fill plan in this area in particular, but it will inevitably push more stormwater onto my property and the neighbors I have up Mountain Creek in Spring Lake West. We cannot just assume that FEMA and TDEC are going to protect us. Next slide. One condition I think we could add is a 100-foot buffer along this particular property line. This would include a 60-foot stream buffer for flooding, a 30-foot landscape, and a 10-foot space for the sidewalk. As you can see in the picture, the creek is on the applicant's property, and it does flow that direction when it floods, regardless if the GIS map shows otherwise. Let's see here. Any civil engineer can draw a plan showing that no water is going to leave a development, but in a lot of cases that's complete nonsense because a fill plan like this one that's potentially proposed is going to keep the natural flowing water from going onto that property, but forcing it in a different direction, which is probably going to be my house. Filling in this much dirt close to my property will add a ton more water that's coming off Signal Mountain Road. I'm not sure what the benefit of this particular condition that you added of a 30-foot landscape buffer is going to do if it all washes away on the first big storm. Let's go to the next slide. According to the fill plan that's, I think, approved, the dirt level is going to raise 12 feet or more. Not only is this a stormwater issue, but it will create a nuisance for my family and my right of quiet enjoyment. There's no way on earth I would have bought my single family home on 3.5 acres that has no development potential ever because it does have a pond and 2 creeks. If I had even a hint that a developer someday would bring in a mountain of dirt on adjacent R1 land, fill in the flood zone, push Signal Mountain stormwater onto my property, and cram in a bunch of townhomes on top of this 12-foot mound of dirt, just feet from my home. And this last slide, and go to the next slide. This is Wanda. She is a neighbor of the applicant's recent development off Cassandra Smith Road. And unfortunately, this development was approved without taking into account her rights as a property owner. And this was approved by RPA and the stormwater folks, but it's resulted in tons of flooding on her property. And something like this is proposed to be directly adjacent to me and my other neighbors. You know, this happened to this 80-year-old or 90-year-old woman, but I'm definitely not going to allow this to happen to me. And if all this water is pushed in my direction, you know, it's just not going to happen. So I think if the PUD is ever to be approved on this parcel, there ought to be drastic reduction in density, stream buffer along this property line, and a longer landscape buffer, more than 300 feet, maybe 400 feet. I think that would actually, you know, block the townhomes more.
Brian, I'm going to have to ask you to wrap up the comments. We've got to hear from a couple other people. So you're at 4 minutes. And so please wrap it up.
Okay, I just had one more sentence. I also think another condition, I think landscape buffer should be added on any townhome unit or single family home apartment that the rear faces the public roads like Mountain Creek and Reeds Lake Road. That's all.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to now bring in William Todd. Just one moment. William, you should be allowed to speak.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, great. My name is William Todd. I live at 4510 Solomon Seal Trail, Chattanooga 37415, and I'm going to address road infrastructure issues. My comments deal specifically with issues on Westview Road, but the same issues exist on many roads throughout the Mountain Creek area. Westview Road is a major route from Reeves Lake, used frequently by over 150 Mountain Creek area residents to reach Morrison Springs Road. 4 cul-de-sacs join Westview, which is their only route for exit and entry. Those cul-de-sacs are Pink Heather Trail, Touch Me Not, Fire Pink Trail, and Solomon Seal Trail. Westview Road runs downhill from Mountain View Road to Reeds Lake Road. It is a narrow, curving road, approximately a quarter mile long with no shoulder. I repeat, there is no shoulder, only a drainage ditch on either side. If a car were to break down on Westview Road, there is nowhere to move out of a traffic lane. Westview has 2 blind curves that are current traffic hazards. One at the entrance to Fire Pink Trail and a second near the entrance of Pink Heather Trail. The speed limit is 25. There are no speed limit signs posted on Westview. Residents, with the help of our city council district representative, had 4 sets of speed bumps installed to improve safety and reduce speeding traffic. There are no sidewalks for pedestrians. There's considerable pedestrian traffic as residents walk their pets or walk for their health throughout the area. Additional traffic would pose an increased risk for pedestrians. Westview Road has visible cracks in the pavement in numerous places from the current vehicle use. The road would further deteriorate with construction trucks and additional cars from any new development. In closing, I want to emphasize additional cars from any new development will increase risk for current residents and worsen both traffic and pedestrian hazards. And there you're looking at a shot of the shoulder and one of the blind curves on Westview Road. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, William.
Mr. Chair, that's it for the designated speakers. Would you like me to bring in anybody else that has requested to speak?
We're at 16 minutes and 30 seconds of listening to opposition. I'm willing to go another few minutes. So yeah, I think it's good for us to hear from a couple other people.
Okay. Next, I'm going to bring in Nikki Collins. Nikki, you should be allowed to speak. Nikki Collins.
I'm here, thank you, but I think everyone's covered my points.
Okay, thank you. Next, I will bring in Steve Davenport. Oh, it says, unfortunately, Mr. Chair, I've received a message. Steve Davenport is not available to talk because he's using an older version of Zoom. It says I can promote him to a panelist. Let's try that. Steve Davenport. It does not appear that Steve is there, so I will move on to Jonathan and Monica Davenport. I'm going to unmute Monica Davenport. You're allowed to speak.
Hi.
Monica?
Hi, this is Monica Davenport. I think that all of our points have been covered. I think the only thing that we would note is, that we've, recently paid off our home. So we do have concerns about property value with bringing in apartments so close to our property. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, would you like me to keep moving through the list or?
Yeah, try one more.
Okay. Next, I'm going to bring in Dawn Gross. Dawn, you should be allowed to speak.
All my points have been covered. Thank you.
Thank you.
One more.
Okay, I will bring in Dawn Oaks. Dawn Oaks, you're allowed to speak.
Thank you. I appreciate you giving us all the time to speak. And the only thing that I want to reiterate is the flooding. I live at 713 Creek Drive, and my backyard has the creek in it. And in the 11 years that we have lived here, we've had 2 flash floods on our street. And that is a big concern as we build on these areas. Thank you.
Thank you, Dawn. All right, Emily, thank you for making that happen, and to everybody who did take time to prepare the presentation for us, just from the opposition. It was very helpful, and appreciate everybody's comments. Before we hear from the applicant, were there any questions specifically for any of the folks that were speaking in opposition from the Planning Commission? Do y'all have any questions at all for any of those folks?
Mr. Chairman, I have one.
Councilman Leonard.
I've heard stated some concerns in looking over the case and then listening to opposition. I'm real curious about a couple of things Mr. Faulkner said about the 50-acre easement. I would like to know more about that if possible. And then also I heard from Mr. Tucker about his concerns and conditions. I'm just, I don't know if anybody, Brian, can you answer anything about the PUD in 1971 or about the 50 acres to give us some sort of legal, I'm not asking you to give me legal interpretation, but.
Good, I'm not an attorney, so.
I'll have that conversation with Phil, that's fine.
Right, I'm not aware of any easement on this piece of property, the 50 acres being set aside as an easement.
Yeah.
Again, this PUD was 1971. I'm not sure what the standards were back in 1971 in terms of a PUD. Typically PUDs, yes, they do require open space as part of that PUD. I don't know if that was a requirement back in 1971, but it does require open space. However, it doesn't mean you cannot develop on it. You can go back through that process to amend the PUD to develop anything set aside as open space.
Okay, I might need to follow up with that on my own. I've got a lot of questions that are surfacing. Thank you very much, Chairman.
All right, any other questions before we hear from the applicant? So we did give opposition a total of about 17 minutes, 18 minutes. And so if we could just bring the applicant back into the meeting, and I feel like they've got just about as much time as they need to respond to those points.
Sure, Mr. Chair. Mr. James Pratt, you're allowed to speak.
Can you hear me?
Mr. Pratt, we can hear you.
Here again, I'll be real short. I'll really talk on 2 topics. One is strictly from a zoning standpoint and all the zoning that we're surrounded by. If you look at the map that's in front of you, the one that was before that, Brian, whoever's in charge of that map right there, you'll notice, I guess that's to the bottom of the screen, I guess that's to the south. We've got R3, we've got apartments, we've got townhomes, we've got a mixture of high density and moderate density. Across from both of those, you'll see townhomes, which are basically the same product that's in Tiger Lily and Daylily. You'll also notice on Reeds Lake Road in what I think is section 1, you'll notice 2 black squares there that is zoned R3 presently, right in the middle of our property. Nobody's pointed that out. Right there. That's zoned R3. But we could put some apartments by right on that small piece right this minute. When you move on down Reeds Lake Road, where you are there, yes, those are apartments, but it's right across the street from a 22-unit high-density condo PUD. So from a zoning standpoint and a density standpoint, based on the rules, we feel like that we more than meet the requirements. From a flooding and stormwater standpoint and stream buffer standpoint, there are rules in place that we have to abide by. We know we can't build in the floodway. We know if we feel anything in the floodplain, we have to abide by all the civil engineering rules where we don't flood people out. So we understand that. And we pay engineers lots of money to do these kind of studies and do these kind of things so that we abide by those rules. And if we are allowed to develop this property, we've got rules and regulations that we've got to abide by, and we will abide by those. And we think it's a much improved plan from the original plan, because we're leaving about 35 or 40% of the whole site as green space. We aren't disturbing the famous post oak tree. We're putting walking trails in it. We've got available area to create connectivity for future walking trails. The green space would allow the conservancy access to their park that they're planning. So all the negativity that is being thrown out, it's got a lot of positive effects as well. And I'll close with that.
Thank you, Mr. Pratt. Stay on the line here with us because there may be some questions for you. To the Planning Commission, are there any questions for Mr. Pratt?
There, I've got one.
Mr. Brown?
Thank you. Mr. Pratt, thank you for that information. Two questions. One's for clarification, and then second one possibly directed to Mr. Pratt. So Brian, in the staff's recommendation, you're suggesting that a type A buffer with 300 feet distance, I think where they're adjacent to the proposed townhome section, that is not captured in this PUD. Is that accurate?
That is correct.
Okay.
We're talking about the buffer being right through here.
Okay, thank you. I thought you'd stated that. Went through a bit of opposition there.
I believe this home to the north is Mr. Tucker that spoke earlier. His property is right here, just with the little white boxes. That's why we're recommending that buffer from these townhomes to his single family dwelling.
Okay. Mr. Pratt, I know you made the comment that you'd like it approved as proposed in the actual PUDs. Were you willing to negotiate and accept the staff's recommendation relative to the type A buffer?
Yes, we are.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Pratt?
I've got a question of clarification.
Mr. Martin?
Mr. Pratt, I thought I understood someone to say a moment ago, y'all going to fill in a lake or one of those ponds. And I've hit a lot of golf balls in my life, by the way. Is that true? Is that what y'all's plan's calling for?
It is calling for filling in some portions of those lakes. We've had a study done, and our environmentalist has informed us that the lakes that we plan to fill in are, from an environmental standpoint, are serving no purpose. And based on what I was told by him, and he was told by TDEC, they would welcome what we plan to do to those particular lakes.
So basically where that water is flowing in and out, you're basically just going to move it.
Yes.
Okay. And then I guess my second question, Brian, if you could go to the I think it's section 5 where the apartments are. Right there. Here's my question. Is what's north of that townhomes and what's south of that townhomes, but they're proposing to put apartments in the middle of the two townhomes? Is that true, Mr. Pratt?
Yes.
Thank you.
Is that it, Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Okay. Hey, Emily, I wasn't able to track with all the opposition in regards to where they lived, but just while we're on that slide, did we have the list of addresses of people in opposition? I mean, people.
Yes, Mr. Chair, it was included in the spreadsheet that you were sent. We didn't map them like this map shows with Brian where they live, but everyone was required to submit their address for the public record when they emailed in their comments, and there are a majority on Mountain Creek Road, Reeds Lake Road, Tiger Lily Trail, Daylily Trail.
We had some down here. Mr. Tucker, who spoke, I believe lives right here. I think Mr. Geyer lives across the street over here somewhere. I'm not sure where Mr. Hunt lives. He may be in the same direction over here. But I think most of the ones who spoke with the presentation live abutting this property line.
Yeah, okay.
But the comments we did receive, the North Chick, we did get opposition, or not, sorry, support letters. They don't live here. Of course, they represent the Conservancy group. We did get a lot of people live in Springs Lakes Rest, Tiger Lily, Pink Fire Trail down here. So we did get comments all over the place, but they did put their addresses as required.
Okay.
Chairman.
Mr. Matthews.
One quick question for Mr. Pratt. Mr. Pratt, you still there?
Yes.
Brian, could you pull up sheet number 2?
This one here, Mr. Matthews?
No, that's 3.
That one?
The one with the, there's no structures on.
That one.
There, that's it. Mr. Pratt, Brian, under his presentation, mentioned that at some point in the future, someone could come back and develop this piece of property, but they would still have to go through the process, as Rich explained well. What is the likelihood that that would happen, that this piece of property here would be developed?
It would be 0 by us.
Okay, but that property can be sold separately as a separate tract.
But it still would be under the auspice of a PUD, no matter who owns the property.
Correct. So as long as there is no change to that major change to the PUD, this property could not be built on.
It cannot be built on unless someone else reapplied through the PUD process. Because right now, this PUD basically puts the condition on it to leave it as is, undisturbed.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Any other questions for the applicant?
I don't have a question for the applicant, Mr. Chairman, but I do have a couple of comments.
Please, Mr. Bailey.
I'm not exactly sure where I stand on this right now, and listening to obviously a significant amount of opposition. I don't know that I'm going to reference it specifically, Mr. Schultz, but would you go back to the drawing that shows everything? I think I'm going to try to limit my comments just to 3. Firstly, we use PUDs a lot, and I do sometimes worry about whether they're being used as intended. I don't know that this should affect our action or my vote, but I worry a little bit about the moving of a lake as it relates to a PUD, because I think the PUD is intended to create more flexibility to respect environmental features. So I do have some concern about that. Like I said, I'm not sure. I know that engineering can move things and they do it a lot. It does give me some concern, number one. Number 2, I wonder about precedent. I asked early on the staff to clarify the intensity levels. When I reviewed this before today's meeting, I was thinking that the intensity levels would be higher because Mountain Creek Road carries a fairly significant amount of traffic, and the intersection of Reeds Lake and Mountain Creek Road, I felt like probably was at least a medium intensity. And then I realized when I read the staff report again today that it's an intensity level of 1 and 2, and Mountain Creek Road really doesn't carry very many cars at all north of Morrison Springs. It's generally about 2,000 a day, which is a pretty low volume street. And Reed's Lake is also a very low volume street. I think it's probably less than 500 cars a day. So that comment really zooms into sheet 5 where there are apartments. And that's where I'll stop and make a question, I guess, of John or Brian is how should we think about precedent as it relates to where do you draw the line on development form and development pattern as you begin to drift towards the north? It would seem to me that Morrison Springs Road would be a natural kind of boundary for that kind of development. And then make one comment on that. I know that Mr. Pratt doesn't control that property, but if it were at all possible, and the way that this site plan is designed, it doesn't seem like it would ever be possible. But if it would ever be possible to connect the multifamily apartment section, as shown on the slide that Brian has in front of us, down to Morrison Springs Road, it would take a significant amount of burden off of Reed's Lake and potentially Mountain Creek and also Westview. If someone that lives here wants to go to Red Bank High School, for example, they're either going to turn right and go down Westview, or they're going to turn left, which we probably don't want a whole lot of. And then they're going to turn left again on Mountain Creek, and then they're going to turn left again on Morrison Springs. And somebody already referenced that there are apartments on Morrison Springs. It seems like a more appropriate location. And then sorry, my third comment I lost track of. I might have to come back. I should have written it down, Mr. Chairman, but I'll stop there and I'll reiterate my question. Brian and/or John, I know you're recommending approval, which means a lot to me, and I recognize there are townhomes and single family in the vicinity. How do we weigh the issue of where we stop as it relates to multifamily housing that's being shown on this sheet here?
Brian, let me take a crack at that. I think the way we saw the departure line was Reed's Lake Road. I think as Alec already mentioned, you've already got some R3 zones, although it's a small spot just north of Reed's Lake Road. But if you look at the zoning pattern of the area, definitely that's a kind of a defining line is Reed's Lake Road itself. If you notice where they're nesting the apartments, it's for the most part, with one exception, there's one node that goes across. That's where you got your condos development's already there. Most of the apartments being proposed, or actually a large part, are south of Reed's Lake Road. And that's where you've got your townhouses that already exist. So, and if you look, most of the first section, we have all the open space. That's where most of your lowest intensity residential is, right? The larger, the Brian wants to go over all the densities in the area. The upper part of Reed's Lake has already got very low density. There's very little housing there. The only time you start to get housing is that second segment that actually comes off of Mountain Creek Road. You got some townhouses, and then it kind of, I guess the way I look at it, intensifies as you move further south, but also for the most part stays south of Reed's Lake Road. So if you're trying to kind of knit the two together where you got some kind of transition, to me, you would want to have your more intense residential uses where you've already got a mix of townhouses. Again, if you look at the overall density, it's still below 5 dwelling units per acre. So you could do a PUD in this area. And as you know, PUDs have no minimum lot sizes, and that the multiplier is 5, correct, Brian? For a PUD?
That is correct. R1, it's
So
5
you could do
dwelling
an
units per acre.
R1 PUD at all single family, and you still have the same unit yield. So I think what the applicant's doing is they're mixing some different housing types in different clusters. But I guess my look at it is your intensity of apartment types are nested, for the most part, are kept south of Reed's Lake Road. Brian, you want to add anything to that?
No, I think you're correct, John. And if you look, most of the apartments are sitting right through here. We do have a TVA power line easements coming through. You do have these townhomes that are in between the townhomes here and these townhomes over here. So I think John's correct. I agree with everything he just stated.
I just want to say that as planning commission, we've seen dozens upon dozens of PUDs. And if staff can correct me, please do, but I don't recall ever having seen a PUD that designates 40% of the land area as open space. I mean, that's normally we're seeing 5%, 10%, some small portion of it that's steep slopes or something like that. But I mean, it's incredibly unusual to see 50 acres of land and 21 acres of it is not being developed. I mean, I really think James and Pratt Homes has done an incredible job with this PUD plan, just at protecting those assets. I understood from the opposition that Pratt did not hold community meetings. But I'm pretty sure, and James can probably speak to this, he understood what their concerns were, and even now understands what their concerns are. And that's why we're seeing a development plan where, 40% of the development is being left undeveloped. I think it's a really, really good plan. I struggle with the fact that we do have so many people in opposition and their neighbors, who, live in the townhome developments that were developed 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, for the last 50, 60, 70 years, this area has been developed. And, these very people live on land that used to have trees on it. And, there are, in some of those slides, you can see some of their houses were developed inside the floodplain. The road that they use to get to and from their houses runs through the floodplain. That road was built in the floodplain and in the floodway. And now here they are in opposition to having some neighbors. This property has been fully developed. It didn't have houses on it, but it was clear cut and developed as a golf course. And today that golf course is going away, and the developers proposing these houses. I concur with James. This is a really thoughtful plan, and I think he's done an incredible job of setting aside large amounts of land. I can't fathom what 20 acres of real estate undeveloped costs. It's a huge gift to this community to designate that sort of land. And in order to designate that sort of open space, developers have to build density on the other parts of their development. And so, to those who don't like the density, I would say, well, the alternative is to develop all 50 acres like their property was developed, because the apartment PUD, it doesn't have any open space. The 22-unit condo PUD, it doesn't have any open space. The townhome developments adjacent to it don't have any open space. And so I'm sure Mr. Pratt could achieve much lower densities if he were to develop all 50 of the acres, and it wouldn't look the way it does today, and it wouldn't have all that open space. So I think this is right in line with the whole reason why we have PUDs. And I think it's a really good development plan. So that's just my 2 cents. I can also, I will say that I understand why it would be hard for this community. They've been looking at a golf course all these years, and that golf course is going to go away. But what they have to keep in mind is that they now live on a road that wasn't there 50 or 60 or 70 years ago. And they all live in developments that required the land to be clear cut and developed so they could live there. And that pattern continues today. And this is done in a far better fashion than any of the developments that they live in, outside of, like Steve Hunt and a couple of the others that live on large acreage. Theirs, of course, are much older and much different, but most of what we see doesn't have any of that open space. So that's just my 2 cents.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Farmer.
I agree with you. As you were talking, I'd reflect back to how much we scrutinize other PUDs, and I think we've looked at this and I think very carefully. I would make a motion to approve the staff recommendation. You're exactly right. This is a property that's going to get developed, and I think this is a good and careful development. We have rules and that they have to follow regarding environmental aspects, and those rules are in place. They're really not as much of a part of this as the approval of the PUD. So I make a motion to approve.
Second.
We have a motion to approve from Mr. Farmer and a second from Wild Coker. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Any discussion?
Yes, sir. I just one quick comment, Chairman, please.
Yes.
So stated some concerns earlier about dividing this into sections and digesting this piece by piece. I want to say this is a difficult one for me wearing the city council hat and chairman of planning and zoning for a couple of reasons. Chairman, you're correct. This PUD is very considerate in open space. The one thing that it lacks for me, and is actually one of my planning and zoning committee rules, is the community collaboration input. So at this level, I just wanted to share that I will be voting no, because that component directly violates my committee's mandate. I hope that the conversation will move differently. I hope that it will move over the next month before it gets to council to involve the community and maybe create some understanding, because this PUD is thoughtful. I will say that. I agree with you 100%, but I would be not serving my committee rules if I did vote for this currently. So I just wanted to share that, and I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Any other discussion? Commissioner Martin.
Mr. Chairman, if this is not approved by City Council and the Planning Commission, can Pratt Development or anybody else develop it? How many units could they build in there? You'd mentioned these 20 acres being a gift. I don't know how much of that's a gift or what, but how many units could be developed in there without a rezoning and a PUD?
Yeah, if the PUD is denied at council level for 1 year, no zoning case can occur on this property, but it can be developed based on the current R1 zoning, which is single family dwellings. Just looking at gross acres of 50 acres, the R1 allows about 5 dwelling units per acre. You're getting 251 units by right.
And Brian,
Now,
can I?
that doesn't take out anything for roads or detention, so it's probably going to be a little less, but that's just the gross.
And this particular, I'm sorry, Emily, you probably have some real insight. I've got questions.
That's okay. I just wanted to clarify, as Mr. Pratt mentioned earlier, a portion is already zoned by right R3 as well. So that
We could change right there.
that could also increase the density potentially, because R3 is a multifamily district.
Yeah.
So more than 250, less than 300?
Potentially. I mean,
Okay.
you got to take out for roads and stormwater detention. He can't develop in a floodway no matter what, if it's the PUD or zoning. But I think what you will see differently, these would not be as compact. You would take these homes from here, shift them over here now. The open space goes away. This all becomes single family detached dwellings. You'd most likely have single family along Reeds Lake Road where you don't have that now.
And in these units right here, what's the total? Remind me the total number here.
225.
Okay. Thank you.
No problem.
Any other discussion? All right, we have a motion to approve, and it has been properly seconded. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Bailey,
No.
Ledford.
No.
Okay, Hyatt,
No.
Barone,
Yes.
Farmer,
Yes.
Lehman,
Yes.
Martin,
Yes.
Coker,
Yes.
Matthews,
Aye.
as an I, yes. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, maybe.
Aye.
Payne.
Yep.
Okay, it passes 8-3.
Thank you, Mr. Bridger.
That's a recommendation to City Council.
And while the opposition is still here, you still have opportunity at City Council next month to share your comments and concerns with the City Council. I'm sure that, John, I'm assuming that means it's going to be virtual as well come February. We don't know for sure, but just watch the City Council website to see if that's going to be virtual.
And I put the website in the chat box. It's also available on the RPA webpage under the virtual meeting page. It has the City Council direct link there as well. You can always contact staff via email or phone call if you have additional questions.
Thank you, Emily. Emily, in regards to these next few cases, we've got items 5, 6, 7, and 8 on our agenda, and 9 that all have staff recommendations to approve. Is there any opposition in regards to any of those cases?
There is not. Item 9 has been withdrawn from the agenda. So 6, 7, 8, and 10, there are no opposition.
And 5?
5, we just heard.
No, let's see, item number 5, 6, and 7 are grouped
Oh, I'm
together.
sorry.
under one-
I'm looking at the case numbers. Case numbers 6, 7, but yes, on the agenda item 5, 6, and 7, and 8.
Okay.
Correct.
Number 10, number 8, which is case 2021-0010. I think the applicant wishes to withdraw that request.
Okay. All right.
But
So-
items 5, 6, and 7 are grouped together under one project. There is no opposition to any of those.
Okay, so I'm going to read them off, and then I'll entertain a motion on those. We have mandatory referral 2021-0006, and this is mandatory referral for a sewer easement and abandonment and has staff recommendation to approve. What's the
Move to approve.
Move to approve.
Second. All right, we have a motion to approve from Mr. Matthews and a second from, who is it from?
Me,
Lehman. Any
Lehman.
discussion? All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Bailey,
Aye.
Ledford,
Yes.
Hyatt,
Yes.
Barone,
Yes.
Farmer,
Yes.
Lehman,
Yes.
Martin,
Yes.
Coker,
Yes.
Matthews,
Yes.
maybe,
Aye.
Payne.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Next case on the agenda is mandatory referral 2021-007. And this is for storm drainage easement abandonment and has a staff recommendation to approve.
Move to approve.
We have a motion from Barry
Second.
and a second from Councilman Ledford. Any discussion? All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Bailey,
Aye.
Ledford,
Yes.
Hyatt,
Yes.
Barone,
Yes.
Farmer,
Yes.
Lehman,
Yes.
Martin,
Yes.
Coker,
Yes.
Matthews,
Aye.
maybe,
Aye.
Payne.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Next case on the agenda is case 2021-0008. And this is a lift conditions from an ordinance number 6120 and has a staff recommendation to approve.
Move to
Move to
approve.
approve.
Second.
Motion to approve from Barry Payne and second from Councilman Ledford. Any discussion? All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Bailey,
Aye.
Ledford,
Yes.
Hyatt,
Yes.
Barone,
Yes.
Farmer,
Yes.
Lehman,
Yes.
Martin,
Yes.
Coker,
Yes.
Matthews,
Aye.
maybe,
Aye.
Payne.
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right, and it's my understanding that the applicant wants to withdraw the case 2021-0010. Is that right?
That's my understanding. Unless they've changed their mind, that's the last word we had. They wanted to withdraw.
Need a motion?
Emily,
Second.
can you pull the applicant into the meeting?
I did. Caitlin Sins, you should be allowed to speak.
Yes, we would like to withdraw this case at this time, please.
Thank you. I'd entertain a motion.
Move to withdraw.
Second. Okay, so Mr. Matthews moved to withdraw and Mr. Lehman seconded that. Any discussion? All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Bailey,
Yes, aye.
Ledford,
Yes.
Hyatt,
Yes.
Barone, Farmer,
Yes.
Lehman,
Yes.
Martin,
Yes.
Coker,
Yes.
Matthews,
Aye.
Maybe,
Aye.
Payne.
Yes.
Motion carries.
And Mr. Schultz, on 2021, have they already withdrawn or they're wanting to withdraw?
No, I think 2021-012 will move forward. I'm not aware of them asking for withdrawal on that.
Okay, all right. Is there any opposition, Emily? on that?
There is not, and the applicant is present.
Okay, so we have an application on 2021-0012 to rezone from R1 residential zone to R2 residential zone. It has a staff recommendation to approve. There's no opposition present. What's the will of the commission?
Move to approve.
Second.
We have a motion to approve from Councilman Ledford and a second from Mr. Coker.
Yes.
All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Bailey,
Aye.
Ledford,
Yes.
Hyatt,
Yes.
Barone,
Yes.
Farmer,
Yes.
Lehman,
Yes.
Martin,
Yes.
Coker,
Yes.
Matthews,
Aye.
Maybe,
Aye.
Payne.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Bridger. Emily, on case 2021-0013, do we have any opposition present?
There is, Mr. Chair. One person, Sonia Haskins, has requested to speak, and then Louise Ferry submitted written comments that you received yesterday.
Okay, thank you.
I'm looking to see, though, if Sonia Haskins is still in the meeting. I don't see her name showing up. So Sonia, if you're here, when it's, please raise your virtual hand.
You just
I
raised
see
it.
a Sandra.
Sandra.
Okay, so it looks like she is here and would like to speak.
Okay, thank you. We'll hear from Mr. Schultz, then we'll hear from the applicant.
Okay, this is case 2021-0013. Request to rezone from A1 Agriculture District to R3 Multifamily Residential. Proposed use is apartments. Total size of this property is 16.2 acres. Proposed number of units is 72 with a density of 4.4 dwelling units per acre. It's located at 132 Detour Road. Here's the site located highlighted in yellow along Old Ford and Detour Road. US 27 is just right to the right. Here's a view looking at the site from Detour Road, crossing a railroad track. This is the site just behind these trees. Another view of the site, Detour Road has since been paved, but this is the site just to your left. And this is a view of the site behind these trees from looking from Old Fort Road. And just an aerial view of the site again. Here's the railroad track, US 27, just to the top of the screen. Detour Road wraps around. This is Old Ford Road, and this is the site itself. It's currently zoned A1. Everything around this property is A1 and R5. I do have a special permit for single wide mobile home sitting here. Further south along 27, you see more of the R2/C2 commercial zones along Dayton Pike and Leggett Road. This is a railroad track running through here, but in general, in this general location is primarily A1 and R5. There are no high intensity residential zones in this general location. There has been no zoning history on this site. This property is currently vacant. To the north, a single family detached residential. To the south, a single family detached residential. And of course, to the east or to the right towards 27 is vacant property and a railroad track. There is no adopted land use plan for this. This is in the Hamilton County Comprehensive Plan, which is intensity levels 1 and 2 that we previously discussed on the Mountain Creek Road. It's the same intensity levels. This property is located in the floodplain. This is the general property right through here. So you can see pretty much half of this property is located in the floodplain. It's not in the floodway, but it is the floodplain. Hamilton County Engineering did provide some comments or some concerns with this proposed development. Number one is sewer availability. This project is not on sewers, so sewer availability is a concern. And access to the property. Detour road will need to be upgraded / require substantial improvements for this type of intensity or density at this location. So engineering from Hamilton County does have some concerns. Staff looked at this. The proposal is not compatible with the comp plan. It is not compatible with adjacent land uses and development form. If approved, this will set the precedent for future requests by introducing a multifamily zone into primarily agricultural, low intensity area, and the lack of infrastructure in this area, especially along Detour Road, which is a 2-lane narrow road, is probably not adequate to support the high density uses. So staff recommends to deny this request for R3 at this location.
Thank you, Mr. Schultz. Any questions for staff before we hear from the applicant?
Hey, Mr. Chair, if you would, may I ask maybe one question or so?
Mr.
Staff.
Go ahead.
Brian, just in talking about the need to have different types of housing in certain areas relative to different areas of Hamilton County, just a question relative to and I understand the road concerns. I actually went up there. We've repaved it, but obviously there's on the west side of the railroad tracks, you would have concerns and without maybe the applicant agreeing to expand the road maybe to their side, that could probably be done with a dedication of right of way and an expansion of the public road on the south side. What from a zoning from a land use zoning perspective, as we continue to move north, can you talk a little bit about whether, just in looking at it when I drove up there, I could foresee the area along Dayton Pike being commercial, and then in the future being some type of transition housing as you move away from, say, a Dayton Pike. Was there some discussions relative to staff maybe related to that?
Well, we did, our biggest concern is putting a high density, medium density zone at this location. You don't really have any R3s or medium density zones in this location. Another concern we had was the lack of sewers. If sewers and it was in this location, I think we may have took a little different look at it. John can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the lack of infrastructure in terms of sewers was one component. And then the land use plan, which is the comp plan, recommends low intensity levels 1 and 2. You're right. They can dedicate and improve the road on what they own, bring it up to standards. You're still looking at probably another, I don't think we received anything from Hamilton County EMS about accessing apartments across the railroad track. And I'm sure this detour road probably snakes all back around to Dayton Pike, but we just felt at this time, this A1, which is primarily this whole and general area, is sparsely developed. It doesn't make sense at this time to put medium intensity or low intensity apartments at this location. I hope that answered. John wants to.
Yeah, I'll just add, if you contrast this to the case we just acted on Reeves Lake Road, in that situation, you already had some surrounding presence of other housing types and you had sewer. So I think that's, so I think from looking at it, without having a plan for this area, and clearly, I think, Todd, what you're getting at is if we were doing a plan for this area, we might take a look at this site, look into the future. But since we don't have that plan yet, we're looking at essentially what existing services there are and what's the existing zoning and housing development pattern. And since there's not a precedence for R3 in this area, we would be setting that precedent as staff. And without an existing precedent of zones or those similar types in that area, we just didn't feel it was appropriate to make that recommendation, particularly in light of what the comp plan was telling us. So,
yeah.
No, I understand it. And I'll only mention this just because it's been some conversations here recently relative to sewers and whether you have sewers now and whether you can develop and regulate certain areas to stay, unimpacted for septic, for the event that in some, in the future, if you get sewers, you obviously can then you've got a certain density set up, and then you can expand into the other area with sewers. And I understand the point relative to whether there's any current plans for sewer in the area, but I would only mention that he's going to have to dedicate, or the developer's going to have to dedicate quite a bit of that property to a state standard approved septic system that, in the event so you go ahead and get density, you go ahead and get transition, and then in the future, if you ever get sewer, you have some density, and then you have some additional area. So just that's been brought up here recently relative to that. So I just thought I'd bring it up. But thanks for the answer.
Okay.
Any other questions? All right, we'll hear from the applicant first in our position.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to unmute Alan Jones and bring him into the meeting. Alan?
Great. Can everybody hear me?
We can.
Great. Well, thank you. My name is Alan Jones with ASA Engineering. I'm at 714 Cherry Street. Quick little history on this one. So I'm working with David Hayes to bring 72 apartment homes to the Sail Creek area that really is in need of quality but affordable housing options. My client is not new to developing affordable apartments. He has completed over 3,500 units across Tennessee. He always hires a professional management company and will make provisions for someone in law enforcement to also live in the development. This development is considered workforce housing and will provide 2 and 3 bedroom units. The annual income cap is typically in the $33,000 to $46,000 annually range, which is the salary for teachers, law enforcement, public sector employees, service industry, et cetera. Development in Hamilton County has been slow to reach the Sail Creek area, as you guys discussed during the introduction. In this time, but in time, this area is going to see new growth. You well documented that lack of public sewer is probably the greatest impediment to growth in the Sail Creek area. But my understanding that there are plans in the future, don't know what the time frame is, but to bring public sewer to the Sail Creek area. We will be handling sewer on site with a private septic system. That's why we've got such a large parcel, because we'll be dedicating property on the western side to handle all the septic on site. That'll make sure it meets all the Hamilton County regulations. Excuse me. RPA's reasons to deny, other than traffic, I think Mr. Lehman made note that we can usually take care of the traffic concern by widening the road, which the developer is completely open to widening the road from the railroad. But the reason was that it's not consistent with the comprehensive plan. This is a bigger planning discussion, and I don't want to diminish the value of the comprehensive plan because I do think they are valuable documents. Heck, I'm even on page 38 of the document while I was actually participating in the process. But I don't know how much planning was done for the Sail Creek community other than just leave it as it is. And no public meetings were even held in this area, during the development of that comprehensive plan. Development is coming this direction. It's just a matter of time and when. I think there was discussion about, no R3 zones in the area. I did a little research. I don't think there's any R3 zone in Sail Creek. So it's, a matter of who's going to be first. And I think my client and we've put together, I think, a great plan that will help serve Sail Creek residents. This site is currently low density, but it is only 1,000 feet or less than 1,000 feet from Dayton Pike. And as the crow flies, it's only a quarter mile from the commercial zoning along Dayton Pike. I did host a neighborhood meeting on December 30th, but due to COVID, we did have to limit the meeting to a Zoom call. We did have 8 neighbors join the call, as well as Commissioner Fairbanks. As with most neighborhood meetings, those who are in opposition typically attend. Quick summary of the concerns that I heard. As noted by RPA, traffic and road width was not adequate. Detour road from Dayton Pike to the railroad is adequately wide enough, but the road does narrow on the western side of the railroad. my client's willing to widen the road and dedicate right of way to help widen and make and to make Detour Road wider to make it safer for the traffic conditions. And I don't know if Brian, I don't know if, or Emily, if the site plan presented was shown, but we'll also be looking to move the entrance from where it was shown on the site plan to being closer to the eastern property line of the railroad. This will keep the residents of this development from having to pass the driveways of 2 existing homes along Detour Road. Another concern that came up was views and not in my backyard kind of discussion. We have pulled the buildings back on the site plan 75 feet from the road, where the building setback is typically only 25 feet. My client's willing to install a landscape buffer along Detour Road and to help create a nice view. In addition, this site plan was created intentionally so that no parking spaces are pointing directly at the 2 homes that are across the street. And the other comment was we don't want apartments in our community. With these apartments, they are affordable apartments and they allow for residents in their communities to have the option to move out of a bad or unsafe rental situation to a good home that they can afford. So I'll leave it at that and answer any questions.
Thank you. Alan, are there any questions for the applicant before we hear from opposition?
Mr. Chairman, I have a quick question, if I may.
Mr. Manning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Jones, and I believe it's on your site plan here, but it's real small and hard to see, at least on our material. What is the density you're proposing per acre on this project?
The density is 4.4 units per acre.
Thank you. And Mr. Schultz, were we saying that earlier is R1 5 units per acre? Is that correct?
That is correct. R1 typically has, that's on sewers, on public sewers. It works out to be about 4 to 5 units per acre on sewers.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That's all I had.
Any other questions? Ms. Hyatt?
Yes, I may have missed this, but can you give me the definition of affordable housing that you're going off?
Sure. Yeah. So the affordable housing is, so you have to have a job and it's in-cap based. So the annual income cap for the family or individuals that are living in the apartment cannot make, they have to make, typically the range is $33,000 to $46,000 per year.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, if there's no other questions, we'll hear from opposition. Emily.
Okay, I'm going to bring in Sandra. You're allowed to talk. Or Sonia Haskins, perhaps. The name is Sandra on the Zoom call. Not sure what's happening, Mr. Chair. She's in the meeting and unmuted. There's also a Jeff Patton with his hand raised, but he did not register to speak. I don't know if you want me to bring him in to the meeting or not.
Yeah, please do. Let's just hear from him for just a second and see.
Sure. Jeff Patton, you should be allowed to speak.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
My name's Jeff Patton. I'm a resident at 295 Detour Road. I thought I was going to be registered Friday for this meeting, but something happened, fell through the cracks, and I didn't make it. Our biggest complaint with this apartment complex, we feel like it's going to hurt our property values for one thing. I live just right up the street from where the proposed development is going to be. Also, in addition to, you know, the typical traffic and that type of thing, that area right there is all drainage that drains straight into Rock Creek. And we as citizens are concerned about the sewage fields, how that could possibly leach into the water system. Also, you know, there's just a lot of different issues as far as the road. You guys have touched on that. The traffic, noise and light pollution is a big thing with everybody in the area. And you know, you guys touched on most of the things, but those are some of our main concerns about the incoming development. Thank you.
Mr. Patton, can I have your address for the record, please?
Yes. 295 Detour.
Thank you.
All right, and are we able to hear from Sandra?
I have not heard. Karen, I don't know if you've heard anything on your end from the technical difficulty standpoint, but this other person, Sandra, is unmuted and available to talk. Sandra, if you're there, can you unmute your microphone?
Emily, can she call in?
I can put that in the chat and see if she can call. If you're there and would like to speak, I just put in the chat, you can call 423-643-5902. But she's not able to chat back, so I don't know that we'll get that in time. Oh, now there's another person. I think this may be Sonia. Sonia Haskins? You're unmuted. You should be able to speak.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I thought you were talking to me before because you were saying Sandra, but that's a different person. That's not me. So
okay, I didn't see your name in there earlier.
Oh, that's
so
okay.
Thank you for sticking with us.
Yeah, it's no problem. I thought I'd try the hand raise and see if that would work. So thank you all for listening to our opposition today. So basically, Jeff went over a lot of the issues here. I'm actually relatively new to this area, and not to bring in too much emotional aspect to this, because we want to focus on what are the practical reasons why we oppose this. But I will say that for a lot of the residents here, one of the reasons I moved here, I actually bought 2 lots that are adjacent to this property they're discussing on putting the development on. So I own about 3 acres that are literally connected to it. And one of the reasons I moved here was specifically to have an area that was a bit rural, that was kind of out in the country and didn't have a lot of traffic. These are 1-lane roads out here. And even though they recently paved the roads, there's very limited access, because not only are you dealing with 1-lane roads, but we also have pretty much the train track, which blocks access to both the entry points. So if those are blocked, then you have to go a whole separate way. So the road issue is a huge thing. And not only do you have those problems, but also if between, I can't actually see the map right now, but if you're looking at the map where you have the big area, and then off to the left there where you see that kind of goes up to a little point, there on the left, that actually does not in any way whatsoever show you how sharp that one curve is where the arrow just was. And that curve is incredibly dangerous now as it is, even with limited traffic. And if there were increased traffic on that road, I think it would really increase the potential for accidents and stuff. So that's a huge issue. Jeff also mentioned the environmental impact, and basically there are gray bats in this area, and there are lots of other birds in this area that are trying to have nesting areas and stuff because we're so close to the river. And so you're basically making it, if you were to approve this, that the light and noise pollution from an apartment complex of this size, I think would detrimentally affect the environment in this area. So these are practical concerns that, really don't even have anything to do with the emotional impact of the fact that the residents here simply don't want this. It's just a bad idea for a lot of reasons. I think that really, those are the main ones as far as consideration for a vote. But if you talk with people in this area, it's pretty much a consensus that it's just not something that's desirable. And I realize that this would benefit the property owner by selling that, but there are other places that he could, somebody could build this sort of apartment complex. And as far as this particular property owner, if he wanted to make money selling that property, he could do that in lots for single family homes and still be within the zoning regulations for this area, and also be respectful for the wishes of the other residents. So thank you for allowing me to present that perspective.
Thank you. All right, well, was there anybody else in opposition, anyone?
Nobody else that is registered to speak, Mr. Chair.
Okay. All right, we'll go back to Alan and let him respond to what we've just heard.
Great, thank you. Just to touch on the issues of drainage that heads to to Rock Creek, and all the environmental concerns. We'll, as with all developments that we work on in Hamilton County, everything will have to be approved and reviewed by both TDEC and Hamilton County as far as making appropriate accommodations for both any stormwater on our site that we develop with an increase in impervious area, but also responsibly handling any offsite stormwater that runs through our property. There is actually I don't know when it was done, but there is an old ditch that was kind of carved out kind of north-south through this property to kind of help alleviate some of the, I guess, backage of water on Detour Road. So I know that runs through the property, and we'll be maintaining that and or improving that as needed to help with the offsite water flow. The talk about the traffic, I think we've kind of discussed that at length a little bit as far as the curve. Not that we can anticipate or speculate where everybody drives, but I would assume in general most people from this development would be taking a right out of the complex and taking the path of least resistance to Dayton Pike, as opposed to winding around Detour Road, kind of through the backwoods. Other than that, I think that's what I got.
Thank you, Alan. We've heard from applicant, opposition, and staff, and so I'll open the floor to any questions or discussion.
Chairman, I have one for applicant.
Commissioner Ledford first. Okay, Commissioner Ledford, and then Mr. Farman.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Hey, Alan, are you on?
Yes, sir.
So I heard a couple of things that were obviously concerning, understanding the need for housing options growing in that part of the county. I was up that way actually just yesterday, taking a look around, and it's interesting. So let's talk about the road that's in front, Detour. Do you have any objection to helping that road along right to the 90-degree turn that I'm hearing some concern about? I know that it extends further than your property line, but I think that you had mentioned widening the road, making it safer. Would you be willing to look at going down to that 90-degree turn and taking a look at that?
I mean, without committing my client's money, but yes, I think we'd actually we'd definitely be looking at willing to make improvements to make it safer. Yes.
Okay. And then can you tell me, I didn't see on the map, Alan, how tall are the buildings?
2 stories.
Oh, they're only 2. Okay. I thought they were 3. My
Yes,
next
sir.
question is, could you design, like in UGC, we have a lot of different, more stringent lighting options than, say, for example, C2, where I feel like we have none, but that's another story. Would you be willing to work even a little bit closer with the community in the next month to design parking lots and areas? I noticed you didn't put cars facing other the houses. Would you be willing to look at lighting options that kind of really tone down, I think, what most people think of with a building like this, to maybe even come up with a little better solution than what's normal to keep the rural, the darkness, the light pollution down to its absolute minimum without compromising safety, of course. Would that be something that you think you could talk with the nearby neighbors before the next step in this?
Well, absolutely. And part of the, lighting, there's such a huge progress in the lighting industry these days to help with the night sky, the dark sky initiatives, that we can design lighting with, especially with the way LEDs work these days. You can really control where that light pollution hits. So yeah, absolutely, we'd be willing to work with the community.
Okay, and the last part would be something I think that could be worked out as well, and that is we didn't talk about any kind of refuse collection, hours, locations, times a week, whatever. I think that's something that would be a concern to the neighbors as well, as they're not, maybe corresponding that with the days their trash is picked up. I'm just trying to throw out things that people I know are probably concerned about out there, and understanding where we are in this day and age too, with the needs that we have. So that's the questions I have for you, and appreciate you listening. Thank you, Chairman.
And Councilman Ledford on the refuge collection, we'd be really open to putting in, whether it's the, not before 8, not after 4 or 5, this kind of the standard kind of language we put on refuge limitations.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Well, you've got residents living there, so you're not going to want, your residents aren't going to be okay with a 5 o'clock in the morning pickup. Mr. Farmer?
Yeah, thank you. I think Councilman Ledford makes all really good points. Some of those I agree with as well. Definitely think that you need some dumpster service on the site plan and a plan for that as well. I think we're going to start seeing more of this kind of stuff in this side of the county, with the county talking about a new industrial park close by. I agree with Mr. Lehman that a variety of mixed housing makes a lot of sense in this area. I think there's certainly a need for it. Also, I think the developer has a good kind of low impact plan here that works. This group has talked a lot about affordable housing, and that means a lot. So with those statements, I would make a motion to approve.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Farmer, and Ms. Hyatt for the second. Any discussion? All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Bailey. Can y'all hear me?
We can.
Okay, Bailey. All right, I'll come back in. Ledford.
Yes.
Hyatt.
Yes.
Verone.
Yes.
Farmer.
Yes.
Lehman.
Yes.
Martin.
Need to recuse myself.
Okay. Coker.
Yes.
Matthews.
Aye.
Maybe.
Aye.
Payne. Payne. Okay, so that's me. Okay, motion carries, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Bridget. All right,
Mr. Chair, if I may, and this may be for Planning Commission, RPA staff as it moves forward. I did hear the comments relative to Detour Road. I will state there's not adequate right-of-way down past this developer's site. That's why we made the comment relative to dedicating some right-of-way in front of there. So I just wanted to make sure RPA staff had that information as it goes to County Commission. I wouldn't necessarily want to see a condition requiring somebody to do something that there's not adequate right-of-way for. So just as a note, thank you.
Right, and this was approved with no conditions, correct?
That's my understanding. That's
Yes,
my understanding.
okay.
I just wanted to make sure y'all had that information in case I wasn't part of that discussion.
Okay.
Thank you. All right, next case on the agenda. Emily, do we have opposition?
We do, Mr. Chair. One person is registered to speak in opposition.
Okay, and is the applicant present?
I believe so. Stephen Brady, if I don't see. If you're the applicant, can you please raise your virtual hand? I don't see if the applicant M&H Properties or Stephen Grady.
All right.
They, for the record, did not respond to my email requesting them to register as an applicant. So I
Okay.
never got confirmation that they would be in attendance.
Okay. All right. We'll hear from Mr. Schultz and we'll hear from opposition. You're muted, Brian.
Sorry about that. I keep forgetting. This is case 2021-0015, rezone from M1 manufacturing zone to UGC urban commercial zone for mixed use commercial and residential. Property is about 1/2 acre in size. Located at 1132 Main Street. South Host Claw is just to the right of the screen here. And it's about, here's Gulf Street. So it's about 2 blocks away from the intersection of South Host Claw and East Main Street. This is the view of the site. It's currently a veterinary clinic, veterinary hospital. This is a view north of the site, right across from the site, across from Main Street. This is a view looking west on Main Street. Site's just to your left where this gravel parking lot is. This is a view looking east on Main Street towards the ridge cut. The site's just on the right-hand side right here. This is South Holtz Claw. And this is a view south of the site. The site's just behind this little awning. It's currently zoned M1 manufacturing. You do have precedence for UGC in this general area. You have UGC to the north, south, east, and west, but primarily abutting this property is M1. I do have C2 setting, UGC again to the west and south and east and north. Further north is R3. Again, there is precedent of UGC in this general location. There's been no recent zoning history on this particular piece of property, but again, adjacent properties have been rezoned from M1 to UGC, so the precedent has been set in this general location for UGC. Currently, this property is currently a veterinary clinic. To the east is office and commercial. To the south is vacant and commercial property. To the west is vacant and commercial, and to the north is residential and office uses. This is in the historic River to Ridge area plan, which is adopted in May of 2020. That recommends an urban corridor place type for this particular piece of property, which is a broad mix of uses, including multifamily housing, professional offices, institutional uses, retail, entertainment, and light industrial in this place type designation. Staff recommendation is to approve. The proposal is compatible with adopted area plan. It is compatible with adjacent land uses and development form. Staff does recommend to add condition to restrict those uses in the UGC zone that do not support the urban corridor policy recommendations for a pedestrian-friendly environment. So staff recommends to approve subject to the following condition: drive-throughs, auto-oriented uses, self-service storage facilities, and wholesaling with accessory warehousing uses shall be prohibited. So this comes to you from staff with a recommendation to approve with a condition limiting uses.
Thank you, Mr. Schultz. Any questions for staff before we hear from the opposition? All right, Emily, if you could pull the opposition in, that'd be great.
Sure. Shamika Burt, you should be allowed to speak.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. Hello, I'm Shamika Burt, and I'm here to speak on the property I own the property at 1154 East Main Street. I want to first say that I reserve all my intrinsic rights according to UCC 1-308 and 207. I own the property at 1154 East Main Street. And my issue, first, what I want to know is when I talked to Ms. Karen, she stated that you guys were planning to build another set of condos.
Well, what we do as planning commission, we don't build anything, but what's been asked of us is to approve a rezoning of this property to UGC. So we're not approving a building per se, we're approving a zoning change, if anything at all. Does that make sense?
Well, it makes sense, but I got an email with Miss Karen. I asked her, out blatantly, are you just, just put it to me straight. Are you all building more condos? Because the thing of the matter is, this is a generational house, and I inherited this house and been over here 45 years. Everything around me is new. I'm the only one that's not new in my eyes, besides Macedonia Baptist Church, and I know the Nations. The guy who owned Lipsy Water and all of that. And I see the gentrification in this small area, from the last 10 to 20 years. And it's like, gentrification is great, but at a minimum, as long as residential/commercial property owners are aware of what these applicants are proposing. Now, they're when I walk out on my grandmother's porch, I see condos, I see this, I see that, and it's just, it's just like everybody's just moving in because it is Main Street. It's one of the main streets in the city. You can get to every part of Chattanooga through Main Street. I understand that, but to crowd it and can continue to build condos or whatever they're planning is, to me, a bit much. To me and the church next door is a bit much, going on as far as, how I feel about it.
Okay. Anything else?
No, I just want to listen to what you guys are proposing.
Okay. Well, just to be clear, what's been asked of us is to change the zoning from, I believe, M1, which is manufacturing, to urban general commercial zone. And that's the primary zone down Main Street and Broad Street and Cherokee Boulevard. And so most of those streets are being rezoned from M1 to UGC. So it's pretty common practice for us to see this request. As you can see from that map, most of the zone around it is either M1 or UGC. And the reason why any of it's zoned UGC is because it's been recently rezoned to UGC.
Okay, so what is UGC?
Urban General Commercial Zone.
Okay.
And it's primarily used on the corridors like Broad Street, Cherokee Boulevard, Main Street, MLK. I mean, we see it primarily used in our urban areas where we have high traffic corridors. So that's what's being asked of us today.
So basically, that is the zoning district type. You're changing it to an urban general commercial zone.
That's what's being asked of us. Yes.
And so, what's the benefit or reason for the rezoning?
The applicant doesn't state a reason necessarily, but they do provide a site plan with their intended development.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Matthews.
If I'm going to ask Brian, it's already zoned for M1. Could you read off the uses for that property if it's as currently zoned?
A good.
Well, M1 allows a wide range of industrial uses. It also has a catch-all phrase: any other lawfully legal permitted use that's not allowed in the M4 zone would be permitted. It does not allow residential. So in M1, it's a heavy industrial zone. So it allows any type of industrial manufacturing plant that you could think of. It's going to be limited in size, of course, by the size of that property, but it does not allow residential, which is why they want to go UGC to get residential uses. Of course, the UGC, you can only do townhomes or duplexes. You cannot do single family, you cannot do single family or duplexes. You can do townhomes and multifamily.
So basically what you're saying is that you want to get this out of M1 to make it a UGC. So they want me to tear my house down so you all can build more condos and things like that for revenue for yourselves.
No.
let me jump in. It's only the property that's currently on the map in front of you that's being asked for rezoning. So no, there's nobody here is asking you to tear your house down. And we don't build houses on this property. There's an applicant who's not able to attend today or is not in attendance today that is requesting this rezoning change, not the planning commission. So,
Mr. Chairman, I think she may have gotten a letter from us. There may be some confusion because her property does abut this request. You probably got the letter from us, opposition, because you are adjacent to it, but we're not changing the zoning of your property or tearing your home down, as the chairman stated.
No, I understand. What's your name, sir, that just spoke?
Mr. Schultz.
I'm staff, the Regional Planning Agency.
Okay, Mr. Shaw. No, I was speaking behind you because when you said this is a high industrial zone, and you said that it shouldn't be residential. It won't be residential, and that house is considered commercial residential. So, I mean, am I wrong for stating that behind you?
You want me to ask her, Mr. Chairman?
Well, I think what is maybe causing some confusion is that she is zoned M1.
Yeah.
Her house is in M1, but it's grandfathered in.
Grandfathered in.
Your property is not being rezoned, and absolutely nobody's telling you that you have to tear your house down. All right, Emily, is there any other opposition?
There is not, and I wanted to just answer a question, Mr. Chair, that you asked earlier. I pulled up the application for this case, and it lists mixed use, commercial, and residential as the proposed use.
Okay, that's fantastic.
But no, there is no other opposition that is registered to speak.
Okay. And I'm assuming the applicant still.
No, neither owner or applicant is on the call.
Okay. All right, I'd entertain a motion.
Move to approve with condition.
We have a motion to approve with condition.
Second.
And it has been properly seconded by Councilman Ledford. The motion was made by Mr. Matthews. Any discussion? All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Bailey.
Aye.
Ledford.
Yes.
Hyatt.
Yes.
Barone.
Yes.
Farmer.
Yes.
Lehman.
Yes.
Martin.
Yes.
Coker.
Yes.
Matthews.
Aye.
Maybe.
Aye.
Payne. Motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Bridger.
Chairman, I was going to note for that person who's on the phone, if they want to follow with our staff after the meeting, we'd be happy to help her understand the zoning a little bit better. And it's fine. It can be confusing. So I just want to, if she could shoot us an email at rezoning@chattanooga.gov, we'd be happy also to follow up with her after this meeting to explain some of that in more detail.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. I think there are probably only 10, maybe 12 houses left on Main Street, and that's one of them. And they have certainly been squeezed. So I can understand where she's coming from. Next case on the agenda is mandatory referral 2021-0011. It's located at 0 Hamel Road. I'm assuming there's no opposition.
No, there's not, Mr. Chair.
Move to approve.
We have a motion to approve
Second.
from Councilman Ledford in a second from. Oh,
It was me, Mr. Chairman.
maybe. Any discussion? All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Mr. Bridger.
Sorry, my bad. Okay. Bailey.
Aye.
Ledford.
Aye.
Yes.
Hyatt.
Yes.
Barone.
Yes.
Farmer.
Yes.
Lehman.
Yes.
Martin.
Yes.
Coker.
Yes.
Matthews.
Aye.
Maybe.
Aye.
Payne. Motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Bridger. I think this sets a new record for the longest meeting with the shortest agenda that we've ever had. Most recommendations for approval. So I think there's some sort of combination of record setting that we have to do here. you've got a resolution to amend the Hamilton County Comprehensive Plan as item 4 on our agenda.
I can give you a quick overview, sir, if you like.
Yes.
Again, this is a follow-up to the workshop, as you recall, that we had in October, where Melissa and Courtney from the Strategic and Long Range Planning provided a kind of report on multimodal transportation and some of the trends and what that means for our assumptions going in the comp plan policy. And we had a pretty thoughtful and deliberate conversation at that meeting. And remember, we talked about doing a comp plan amendment to respond to what we learned from that session. Again, this amendment does not change any of the land use recommendations in that policy. All it does is it removes some of the inconsistencies when it talks about multimodal transportation and transit. So that's all it does. It does not change any of the land use recommendations. And I do want to commend again Melissa and Courtney for the great work they did in putting together that report to kind of give us some thoughtful analysis to kind of really set more realistic expectations for how we think about multimodal transportation and transit. So with that, I'd make a recommendation to approve it unless anybody has any questions about what was sent to them.
Thank you, Mr. Bridger. Are there any questions?
Mr. Chairman, may I ask one? And John, happy to talk more. I remember the presentation in October. Can you give me just an example of what this does differently if it doesn't affect land use recommendations? What does it do?
What it does is it takes out, there are some expectations for, it says potential for transit and some of the intensity levels where we learned through the Carter route study that some of those areas aren't ever going to be served by transit in the near future. So we tried to really dial that back to be more specific about, or at least the specific references to transit use. It also made it clear that the development policy as it currently stands is really based on road infrastructure and not necessarily transit. So it clarified that those development policy level recommendations are based on road infrastructure, not necessarily transit. So it's just kind of doing some cleaning up some of those inconsistencies in the comp plan with what we've learned through that study. That was a long-winded answer. I hope that it helps.
I have a question, and I will admit that I have not looked at this until right now.
Sure.
I see a number of things marked out, and I'm reading on a black and white.
And I can share my screen if we need to, because I've got a copy of that too.
I'm reading on a black and white printout, but I just see where things have been marked out. I don't see like a red line where language has been added.
The only time you'll see, if anything you see yellow, if there's text there, that's added text. So if I could, I'll share my screen with you. Oh, I've been disabled. My staff won't let me share my screen. Probably for good reason.
I don't know what happened, John. Let me see.
Brian he has a copy of the presentation. He can pull it up if he wants.
Well, I don't have, I'm trying
There
to
you
get to
go.
it, John.
Okay. They've let me loose, y'all. Watch out.
Go ahead and share it.
Okay, y'all see my screen here. I'm gonna pull. So you can see on the left, it says Goal 2, Connected Communities Narrative. You can see the red where he struck through, and then we added some text that more clearly describe what actually serves that multimodal transportation options are more feasible in areas with well-connected street network, a diversity of land uses, and a concentration of activities and density of residents. So whereas before it just said more densely populated area of the community is the more transportation options become financially feasible. Well, that's not true based on what we learned. So anything you see that has not been struck through, that's highlighted, that's added narrative. I hope that answers your question, Commissioner Farmer.
It does, but am I right just flipping through it? It looks like mainly you just redlined it. It doesn't look like you added much.
It's mostly deletions. And again, I'll state for the record, this does not change the land use recommendations in the plan. It only removes those inconsistencies as it relates to transportation.
Okay.
Any other questions? All right, we need a motion to approve. Councilman Ledford.
Move to approve.
We have a motion to approve. And the second was from Mr. Brown. Any discussion? All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Bailey?
Aye.
Ledford,
Yes.
Hyatt,
Yes.
Barone,
Yes.
Farmer,
Yes.
Lehman,
Yes.
Martin,
Yes.
Coker,
Yes.
Matthews, maybe, Payne. Motion carries. Chairman, I would have just have one other comment. We will be scheduling a follow-up session with PC, as you call it. We're going to have some conversations about how we look at zoning approaches in those multimodal potential areas versus those automotive-oriented areas. I had a meeting with Melissa and her team. They've already put together some ideas for how we organize that session. It's probably going to be in March or April, but we'll let you know when we get closer to that date. So just know that's coming, and we'll get that on your calendars when we're ready.
Okay, thank you. We do have a time on the agenda for public comment on non-agenda items. Emily, is there anybody wishing to speak on non-agenda items?
There is not, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Matthews?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I would like to, I see that Brian brought this up. I myself and some developers, we've got a problem with this 401.32 you see on your screen. And I believe that I actually voted for this last January, about a year ago. And this has to do with a sidewalk. It says to Tennessee Department of Transportation roadway design and guidelines and standards for concrete sidewalks. When I went through this, I believe originally it was my thought that, well, okay, yeah, that's what you do for commercial roads. But I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think Todd may be aware of this, that this standard has been applied to subdivision design for residential subdivision. And Todd, if you're there,
But David, are you talking about the verge, the green verge?
No, it's
because this is section 401.32, which is on the screen now.
Yeah.
That was the previous language prior to January. It just said in residential and non-residential subdivisions, sidewalks or pedestrian ways are not required. In the event they are installed, you got to comply with either A or B. A was about the pavement or the thickness and width. B is in thickness and width in commercial. So in January, the amendment got rid of that and just replaced it to comply with TDOT guidelines for standard concrete sidewalks and the ADA guidelines. And then it said sidewalks shall be a minimum width of 5 feet. I know previously in the subregs, the highway department or subdivision reviews are no longer requiring that verge between the curb and sidewalk. But that never was in the subregs from the very beginning.
Yes, yeah, I understand that. But when you try to apply the TDOT standards, it's almost always in TDOT standards, they have concrete curb and gutter. And it's really difficult to do that with your extruded curbs. And so that really just shouldn't apply to residential. That right there, the roadway design and the concrete sidewalks should be strictly for commercial. And I can see that. But applying that to residential just does not seem to fit the product that these developers are trying to find.
Hey, David, if I may, the requirement is for an ADA standard. And so the ADA standard is now a 5-foot section. We're using the TDOT roadway design as a standard template for the cross slope, the curb cuts, the ramps, and the width in the section. And so there has been some pushback relative to, well, you got an extruded curb and some of the details show curb and gutter. Subdivision regs allow curb and gutter. We haven't found a constructability issue with an extruded curb relative to a 5-foot wide ADA sidewalk adjacent to it. So I know that's been some of the concerns, and then the verge has been some of the concerns. But the requirement is an ADA requirement. It's not a commercial TDOT. We're just using a TDOT standard to get that ADA requapplement. That was the change.
So this only refers to the ADA, actually the corner at the crossing. It doesn't apply to the sidewalk as you're going in front of the houses and things like that?
No, it applies to every sidewalk within the public right of way.
Okay, that's my point. That if hey Brian, do you have? I went the other day, took some photos. You have those photos there, Brian? The one on the left or right. This is your TDOT standard. That was designed for high traffic, commercial. I think this is Dayton Boulevard, and then the next one would be, this is what we've been doing in subdivision. So I don't understand why you would want the commercial looking sidewalks in a residential development.
If I may, I think the only concern that I've been hearing is that grass strip. It doesn't have anything to do with the 5 feet or the ADA requirement. We have an issue with developers that want to make that verge whatever they would like to make it. And we've had all kinds of requests from 12 inches to 5 feet to greater than that. And one of the concerns is, number one, consistency. And number two is, if you drive through a lot of our subdivisions that were done here in the last year or two with a 5-foot verge, we've got irrigation, we've got light standards that aren't county standards, we've got trees. And so the concern becomes, as that verge becomes larger, there becomes a whole lot more buildable liability issues relative to between the curb and the sidewalk. And so the issue is the verge. It doesn't have anything to do with the ADA standard. So
yes, well, yeah, and I agree with that. But quite frankly, if I knew that when I voted for this, if I'd known that was the issue, because it didn't appear to be, I wouldn't have voted for that.
What you voted for has nothing to do with how we maintain and operate and allow sidewalks to be placed in our right of way. So
but no, what I voted for, it looks like it has to be 5 feet and with no verge. Is that correct?
It does have to be 5 feet to meet ADA.
And no verge.
Well, it doesn't say anything about verge in what you voted for, but the verge is an issue that we're dealing with, maintaining and operating our right of way.
Let me be clear too, the previous version never mentioned the verge either. This is the previous version. So nowhere does it ever mention the verge prior to that amendment.
The issue with what's been done in the past is we never required them, we never inspected them, we never operated and maintained them. What happened with the transition plan through ADA, through our TPO, that basically said, if you don't start requiring ADA accessible facilities within the public right of way, we're going to take away your federal subsidy relative to transportation projects. So everybody in our TPO had to sign a piece of paper saying that we're going to, if we allow pedestrian ways within the public right of way, they must meet ADA. The verge is a requirement from us relative to the way the sidewalk is adjacent to the curb. TDOT has the same kind of standards. I understand that relative to the way aesthetically somebody wants it to look, but we're leaning more towards consistency. So I think we can continue this conversation. I've had this conversation with the home builders. We'll continue to have it as we move forward, but it has nothing to do with this 401.32 relative to the verge.
Okay, so they've been allowed to do the verge, but now you're requesting them not to do that? Is that?
They've been allowed to do the verge because we haven't inspected them, nor approved them, nor required for them to be ADA. We did an inventory about 5 years ago on our subdivisions. There was one subdivision that had ADA accessible sidewalks. They're 3 feet. There's no curb. So the point is that we've allowed it because we haven't approved it, and now we're required to actually approve it, maintain, and operate. It has nothing to do with this other than we got it in the subdivision regs, so at least we were being consistent. The verge is an internal detail that we are currently requiring.
Okay, can we revisit that? And if it's coming up with a standard that everyone complies with, that includes the verge, and you give them an option to use the verge or not, But if you want consistency, then let's create a standard that everyone will follow. You agree to work on that?
We have created a standard, but we'll continue the conversation.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Before we adjourn, we need to approve the county commission.
Move to approve the minutes.
And it has been seconded. I think Redford was the motion, Lehman was the second.
Bailey,
Aye.
Ledford,
Yes.
Hyatt, Jerome, Farmer. We lost some folks. Farmer, Lehman,
Yes.
Lehman, Martin,
Yes.
Coker.
Yes.
Okay, Matthews,
Aye.
maybe,
Aye.
Payne. So I have another announcement. Everybody who stayed on late for this meeting gets the year-end bonus that we were going to be handing out at the end. We're being
You can double our pay.
Hey, John.
I just want lunch.
Hey, John, I just got this in the mail today.
Huh. There you go.
Why?
You're so
I
good.
didn't get one in the mail.
You're so good you didn't need it, Chairman. You're
Yeah.
so good you didn't need it. You knew what was in it without even getting it.
The mail did not, the mail was running late this time for some reason. They didn't, since I guess the county did not come to pick up the mail last week, the week before last, I mean.
The county?
That would be the federal government.
We sent them out to the county mail room.
Oh.
And so she didn't come pick them up.
Gotcha.
It was in my mailbox.
Well, that makes a good transition. I don't want to keep us any longer, but how many would like to continue just to receive the email instead of an actual paper copy?
I like the paper.
Okay.
I'm a printer.
Paper.
Paper. Okay, just trying to save trees. We'll still send them out though.
I'm gonna recycle them.
You don't need to send it to me, Brian. You can save that tree.
That's true. Oh, Blythe. Thank you, Blythe.
There you go, Blythe. And razors.
I wasn't going to comment on that.
All right. Anything else before we adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. I'm going to stop the recording.